The truck came grinding up Caleb Rose Hill at 8:17 on Monday morning, shedding pale dust and making noises no vehicle should make unless it was carrying livestock or losing an axle. Caleb stepped out of his trailer with one boot unlaced and a spoonful of cold beans still in his mouth. 4 older people sat in the cab and on the flatbed among shovels, pry bars, coils of rope, and dented metal lunch boxes. The woman driving stopped within 3 feet of Caleb's folding chair. She shut off the engine, climbed down, and looked past him at the barren slope as if checking whether it had moved. "We're looking for whoever Amos Rowe left the upper hill to." Caleb swallowed the beans. "That would be me." All 4 strangers studied him, not rudely, more like mechanics listening to an engine that had just made an expensive sound. The woman glanced at his trailer, the orange extension cord running nowhere, and the dress shirt hanging from the awning because Caleb had spilled coffee on it before his grandfather's will was read. "You're Caleb? How do you know my name?" "We didn't." She pulled on a pair of leather gloves, not for certain. An old man on the flatbed began passing down tools. Caleb looked from one weathered face to another. 6 days ago, his own family had laughed when he inherited 61 acres of dead grass and basalt. Now, 4 strangers had climbed the worst road in Bellwether, carrying enough equipment to dig up a body. The woman pointed toward Caleb's feet. "Move your chair," she said. "You've got it sitting in the ditch." Caleb looked down at the hard, dusty ground. "There's no ditch here." She gave him a small, unreadable smile. "That's why we came looking." 6 days earlier, Caleb had believed the worst part of his grandfather's will would be hearing Amos Rowe reduced to an inventory. 1 walnut dining table with 6 chairs, 1 Winchester rifle currently stored unloaded, 1 1987 Ford tractor, not in operating condition. The attorney, a narrow man named Mr. Baines, read every item in the same gentle voice, including the tractor, which had not moved under its own power since Caleb was 19, and therefore seemed unlikely to be offended. They sat in Mr. Baines's conference room, around a table glossy enough to reflect their hands. Grant wore a navy blazer over a work shirt, the cuffs clean and the collar open in a way that suggested he had recently looked up how ordinary people dressed. Marin had brought a yellow legal pad and was taking notes, though Mr. Baines had provided everyone with copies. Caleb had come straight from his night shift at the farm supply warehouse. He had cleaned the dirt from beneath his nails in the restroom and changed into the shirt now hanging outside his trailer. He still smelled faintly of fertilizer and peppermint gum. Amos had been dead for 11 days. For the last 3 years of his life, he had occupied the front bedroom of the farmhouse and complained about the view, the mattress, the coffee, Caleb's cooking, televised baseball, and the fact that nobody manufactured a decent thermostat anymore. When Amos could no longer manage the stairs, Caleb had moved from the upstairs bedroom into the laundry room so he could hear him call at night. Grant had called that arrangement temporary. Marin had called it practical. Amos had called it noisy whenever the washing machine entered its spin cycle. Now, Mr. Baines said, touching the page with one finger, regarding the real property. Grant uncrossed his legs. Marin stopped writing. Caleb hated himself a little for sitting straighter. The farmhouse, barn, machine shed, and approximately 8 acres of road frontage went to Grant. Grant nodded once, solemnly, as if receiving military remains. The lower orchard, packing shed, irrigation equipment stored therein, and 32 adjoining acres went to Marin. Her pen made a quick mark. Then Mr. Baines looked at Caleb. "To my grandson Caleb Thomas Rowe, I leave the upper parcel commonly called the North Hill, comprising approximately 61 acres, together with any fixtures and appurtenances belonging to said parcel." There was a pause. Grant made a sound through his nose. It might have passed for a cough if he had not covered his mouth too late. Marin looked at him. "Don't." "I didn't say anything." "You made a noise. I've got allergies. In February, the office is dusty, Mr." Baines glanced around his spotless conference room. Caleb stared at the photocopied parcel map. The North Hill rose behind the farmhouse like the hump of some enormous sleeping animal. Rabbit brush grew there. Cheatgrass grew there. In wet years, mustard came up near the lower fence. Nothing else had survived as long as Caleb could remember. Amos called it the Folly, although Caleb had never known whose folly it was supposed to be. "Is there a well?" Caleb asked. Grant's eyes dropped to the table. Mr. Baines checked a second document. "No well is listed." "Power?" Not currently. Road access. There is an unimproved agricultural tract from the west boundary. Grant's shoulders moved. Another allergy. Marin put down her pen. It's still 61 acres. She said it kindly, which made it worse. Sure, Caleb said. Land is land. Sometimes, Grant said. Grant. What? I'm agreeing. Caleb waited while Mr. Baines continued. He waited for an additional sentence addressed to him. A bank account, the pickup, Amos's watch. Something small and unmistakably personal. He would have taken the old thermos Amos carried every day during pruning season, though its lid leaked and the inside smelled permanently of black coffee. The personal effects not otherwise named were to be divided by mutual agreement. There was no letter. Mr. Baines asked whether anyone had questions. Grant had 6 concerning transfer dates, insurance, and the farmhouse keys. Marin asked about orchard contracts. Caleb asked none. In the parking lot, Grant caught up with him. Hey. Caleb kept walking toward his truck. Caleb, come on. It wasn't me who wrote it. I know. I didn't know he was splitting it that way. You asked him about remodeling the kitchen while he was still using a walker. That was one conversation, and he brought it up. He brought up the kitchen? He said the cabinets were garbage. Amos said everything was garbage. Grant shoved his hands into his blazer pockets. He was a head taller than Caleb and had Amos's heavy eyebrows, though Grant kept his trimmed. I'm just saying, don't take it out on us. 61 acres isn't nothing. You want to trade? Grant's mouth opened. Marin came through the office door behind them, tucking her legal pad into her bag. Can we not do this here? Do what? Grant said. The thing where both of you say something you'll repeat for 15 years. Caleb opened his truck door. Marin touched his arm. We should go through Grandpa's personal things together. Okay. Sunday? I work Sunday, then Saturday afternoon. Grant looked toward the street. Actually, about the house. The change in his voice was small. Caleb heard it anyway. Grant had already hired a renovation crew. They were supposed to begin demolition upstairs on Monday, then work down through the kitchen. Dust containment would be difficult with someone living inside. There would be exposed wiring, insurance complications. Grant said all of this while studying a sycamore across the street. How long do you need? He finally asked. Caleb looked at him. To do what? To get your stuff situated. My stuff is situated. You know what I mean. No, say it. Marin closed her eyes. Grant rubbed the bridge of his nose. I need the house empty by Sunday night. Caleb laughed once. He had not meant to. It escaped him like a hiccup. Amos has been dead 11 days, and the roof has leaked for 6 years. I'm trying to save the place. From my mattress in the laundry room. From another winter. Caleb, I'm not throwing you onto the street. No. You're throwing me onto the North Hill. Grant's face hardened, then softened so quickly Caleb almost missed it. For 1 second, his brother looked ashamed. You've got money saved, Grant said. Caleb had $840 saved. He also had a truck payment due, a dental bill in collections, and 3 years of paychecks shaped around the fact that he could not leave Amos alone for more than 9 hours. Marin said, he can stay with me. Her offer was immediate, but not warm. Caleb imagined her spare room with its white carpet and decorative pillows. Imagined being reminded not to leave work boots by the door. I'm good, he said. He was not good. By Saturday, Grant had put blue painter's tape on every cabinet door in the farmhouse. Caleb packed his clothes into feed store boxes and carried them outside, while Grant measured walls. They divided Amos's personal things in the living room. Marin took the family photographs, promising to have copies made. Grant took the desk and Amos's pruning shears. Caleb asked for the thermos. Grant had already thrown it away. It was disgusting, he said. The seal had mold. Caleb stood beside a cardboard box containing Amos's reading glasses, 2 pocket knives, a jar of buttons, 3 mismatched gloves, and the little brass bell Amos had rung when his voice grew too weak to carry into the laundry room. You could have asked? About trash? Marin looked up from the photographs. Grant? What? He can have anything else. Caleb folded the box closed. He bought the trailer that afternoon from a man who had advertised it as road ready, a phrase that turned out to mean it possessed tires. Royalties from an imaginary oil strike might have bought something better. $800 bought a 1994 Fleetwood with 1 working burner, a soft patch in the floor, and a refrigerator that smelled like onions even after Caleb scrubbed it twice. The west track up the hill was worse than he remembered. His truck spun halfway up, and Grant had to tow him the rest of the way with the tractor that the will had described as not in operating condition. Grant leaned out of the tractor cab after they got the trailer onto a bare patch. "You need anything?" Caleb looked downhill at the farmhouse roof. The orchard rose, the silver irrigation pipes stacked beside Marin's packing shed. From up there, every useful part of the property seemed arranged to demonstrate what he had not received. "Nope. You've got my number. Since we were 12. Grant nodded as if they had settled something. Then he drove away. Caleb spent Sunday discovering inconveniences. The trailer battery was dead. The ground tilted just enough that a canned drink rolled off the table. His phone received 1 bar of service if he stood beside a particular fence post and held it chest high. At dusk, the temperature fell fast, and wind found gaps around the windows with professional confidence. He slept wearing his coat. Monday morning, after his warehouse shift, he heated beans in a saucepan and ate them outside because the trailer smelled like propane. That was when the old flatbed came climbing toward him. Now, the woman who had introduced herself as Delia Velez kicked aside Caleb's folding chair and scraped her boot across the dirt. Mateo, her silver-haired brother, handed her a short shovel. Roy Pennington crouched with both hands on his knees, studying a line Caleb could not see. Warren Pike remained near the truck, leaning on a pry bar and catching his breath, without admitting that was what he was doing. Caleb folded his arms. "Did my grandfather hire you?" Delia pushed the shovel blade into the ground. "Not lately. Then who's paying you?" All 4 of them looked amused. "That's a fair question," Roy said. "No one," Delia answered. "That's a worse answer." She levered up a slab of dirt. Beneath it lay a flat stone, set at an angle too deliberate to be natural. Mateo cleared beside her, exposing another stone, then another. They formed the edge of a shallow channel running across the slope. Caleb crouched despite himself. Delia brushed soil from a rusted iron stem, no wider than his thumb. "Upper turnout," she said. "Or what's left of it." Caleb touched the metal. It was cold beneath the sun-warmed dirt. Roy pointed downhill. "This lateral feeds 3 places after it crosses yours. Flow's been weak since Friday. Grant's crew brought gravel up," Caleb said, "for the driveway. We saw the tracks." Delia stood and drove the shovel into the ground so it remained upright. "Ditch clearing is Thursday. Water comes Friday night if we can get this open." Caleb looked across the hill. Now that he knew where to look, the depression continued through the weeds in a long, faint curve. "You're saying this land gets water?" Delia removed one glove with her teeth. "I'm saying it has a turn. Why didn't anyone tell me?" Her gaze traveled down toward the farmhouse, then returned to him. "I expect," she said, "because everybody got used to you not asking for it." Caleb looked downhill again. The farmhouse sat square and white among the orchard rows, its windows reflecting so much morning light that he could not tell whether anyone stood behind them. "Who's everybody?" Delia pulled her glove back on. "People who've been using the water." "Which people?" "Your grandfather, mostly." Then, whichever row thought an apple was more important than anything growing up here. She said it without anger. That made the words land harder. Mateo cleared another yard of the channel with short, efficient strokes. He was built like a fence post, and wore his gray hair in a braid that reached the collar of his denim shirt. Roy had wandered 10 paces uphill, where he tapped the ground with the heel of his boot. Warren lowered himself carefully onto Caleb's folding chair. "That thing's not rated for you," Caleb said. Warren settled in and put the pry bar between his knees. "Neither am I." Roy laughed. Delia did not. The one corner of her mouth twitched. Caleb crouched beside the exposed iron stem. "What kind of turn?" 6 hours every 9th day when there's enough in the lateral, Delia said. "Less in a dry August. Sometimes nothing if the intake plugs. And it belongs to this parcel? The turn follows the ground. Is that written down somewhere?" "Probably." "Probably?" Delia glanced at him. "You want to stand here reading paper, or you want to know where the water goes?" He disliked how much that sounded like Amos. The difference was that Amos would have said it from a chair, while Caleb did the digging. Delia walked east across the slope. Caleb followed, stepping over rabbit brush and volcanic rocks the size of bread loaves. The channel appeared and disappeared beneath weeds, but she never lost it. Every few yards, she pointed with her shovel. "Turn out." Checkbox. That low place used to be a settling pocket. Don't step there. Caleb stepped there before she finished. The crust broke beneath his boot, dropping him ankle-deep in powdery silt. Mateo made a thoughtful sound. Still a settling pocket. Caleb pulled his foot free. Thanks. You learn quicker when the ground explains. The old system crossed the hill in long, shallow curves, almost level, but never quite. Caleb had walked over those lines dozens of times without seeing anything except uneven dirt. Near a cluster of basalt, Delia uncovered a narrow slot cut through the stones. Someone had fitted each rock by hand. A rusted length of pipe vanished beneath them. How old is this? Caleb asked. Some pieces, before Amos. Most of the contours went in later. With you? With all of us. Warren, still seated in the distance, lifted his pry bar like a flag. Delia's face did something Caleb could not read. A lot of people. He waited for more. She scraped the dirt from the stonework with the side of her boot. Thursday, she said, 7 in the morning. We meet at the main gate off Tilson Road. I work nights. So did Mateo for 22 years. Mateo shrugged. You sleep badly either way. I didn't say I was coming. No, Delia said. You didn't. They spent another half-hour marking places with little strips of blue cloth torn from an old feed sack. Roy found the section crushed by the gravel trucks. The channel there had been flattened into 2 muddy ruts, and a gray mound blocked its downhill side. Grant did this? Roy asked. His crew. Same thing if his name's on the bill. Caleb took out his phone and photographed the damage. 1 bar of service appeared, vanished, then returned when he leaned toward the fence post. Delia watched him. Picture won't move gravel. It might get the person who put it there to move it. That would be a pleasant surprise. Before they left, Mateo took a thermos from the truck and poured coffee into 4 tin cups. He hesitated, looked at Caleb, then poured a 5th. The coffee was strong enough to remove paint. Caleb drank it anyway. Nobody offered to explain why they still came together after so many years, or why they had arrived within a week of Amos's burial. They discussed the lateral as if it were an unreliable relative, where it sagged, what it had done last spring, how it behaved when cottonwood roots got into the intake. Warren accused Roy of installing a useless valve in 1998. Roy said the valve had lasted longer than both Warren's marriages, only because nobody could find it to remove it, Warren said. Delia drank her coffee and looked over the rim of her cup at the hill. When they finally loaded their tools, Caleb stopped her by the driver's door. If I don't show Thursday, what happens? We clear what we can. Your turn goes by. Your sister's orchard gets the water it's been getting, so nothing changes. Something already changed. Delia nodded toward the crushed channel. Water doesn't care if you're ready. The truck descended in a yellow cloud. Warren's hand emerged from the passenger window and gave Caleb either a wave or an instruction to move aside. He watched until they turned onto the orchard road. Then he walked the exposed channel again. The line was subtle, but he could no longer unsee it. In places, sagebrush had rooted in the center. In others, the ditch had filled so completely that grass crossed it without interruption. He followed it to the western boundary, where the fence disappeared beneath a thicket of wild rose. On the other side, it continued toward a stand of cottonwoods near Tilson Road. By the time Caleb returned to the trailer, his beans had collected a film of dust. He ate them anyway. He slept for 3 hours, woke with a cramp in his neck, and drove to Marin's packing shed. She was standing beside a portable sprayer, checking hoses against an inventory sheet. Her dark hair was tied up with a pencil. Amos used to accuse her of organizing things that had not yet become disorganized. She saw Caleb and looked automatically toward his truck, perhaps checking whether the trailer was still attached. How's the mansion? The west wing's drafty. I have a space heater. I don't have enough power to run one. You could stay in my spare room. Then where would you keep the decorative pillows? A smile escaped her before she pressed it flat. They go on the bed, Caleb. That's why they're called pillows. No one has ever put their head on those. I'm not arguing about pillows in a packing shed. That's because you know I'm right. The moment almost felt normal. Then he put his phone on the workbench and showed her the photograph of the crushed channel. Grant's gravel trucks did this. Marin zoomed in with 2 fingers. Where? Upper Hill. 4 people came looking for the ditch this morning. Her fingers stopped moving. You know them? No. Delia Velez, Mateo, Roy, Warren. At Delia's name, Marin set down the phone. What did she want? She says I have a water turn. Marin looked past him toward the open shed door. From there, the upper hill was visible above the orchard. There used to be one. She says there still is. Maybe, technically. What does technically wet look like? Don't be cute. I'm trying to figure out why strangers know more about my land than I do. Marin began coiling a hose that was already coiled. Grandpa stopped irrigating up there years ago. The water came down here instead. That's how it's always been. How long is always? I don't know. Since we were in high school, at least. Caleb waited. She tightened the coil until the rubber kinked. The upper ground never produced anything. He was wasting water trying to establish it. So, he moved my turn onto your orchard. It wasn't your turn then. It is now. Her eyes returned to him. He saw the calculation before she could hide it. 32 acres of trees, contracts, fuel, pruning, fertilizer, and a water supply she had accepted as part of the inheritance. Caleb had been doing calculations of his own since the lawyer said 61 acres. "Are you planning to irrigate?" she asked. "I found out 4 hours ago that I could. You don't have crops. I don't have water, apparently. That isn't what I meant. I know." Marin leaned back against the workbench. "There are allocations, schedules. You can't just open something because a group of retirees arrived with shovels. They said ditch clearing is Thursday. And you believe them? They found a ditch under my chair." That pulled another reluctant twitch from her mouth, but it disappeared quickly. "Delia and Grandpa did not get along," she said. "Why? I don't know the whole thing. What part do you know? That she stopped working here." Suddenly, Grandpa said she was impossible, which could mean she asked him a question. It was the first honest thing anyone in the family had said about Amos all week. Caleb put his phone in his pocket. "Did you know about my turn when the will was read?" Marin's face changed. Not enough to answer for her, but enough to make him wish he had not asked. "I knew water used to cross the hill. That wasn't the question. I didn't know what still applied. The orchard accounts were a mess. I'm still finding invoices in kitchen drawers. You had 6 questions for the attorney, about transfer dates and equipment, and none about water that came from land he gave me." She dropped the hose. It struck the concrete with a slap. "What would you have liked me to do, Caleb? Interrupt the will and announce that the useless hill might also come with 6 hours of muddy water? Would that have made you feel better? No. Then what? I would have liked one person in that room to act surprised." Marin stared at him. Outside, a forklift beeped as it reversed somewhere behind the building. "I was surprised," she said quietly. "That I got the hill? That he gave you nothing you could live in?" Caleb looked away first. She picked up the hose, gentler this time. "Take the heater anyway. You can run it from the packing shed outlet if you park lower. That's your solution? It's the one I can give you today." He left without the heater. Grant was in the farmhouse kitchen removing cabinet doors. Dust sheets covered the counters. The old clock still hung above the refrigerator, 5 minutes slow, because Amos believed punctual people should leave earlier. Caleb placed a printed photograph of the crushed channel on the bare table. Grant glanced at it. "What am I looking at?" "The upper lateral." "I didn't know there was an upper lateral. Your trucks drove over it. My trucks used the existing access road. They dumped gravel into it." Grant removed a screw and dropped it into a coffee can. "If there's damage, I'll tell the guys to look. Tell them to move the gravel." "Caleb, they're roofers. Do roofers not have arms?" Grant laid down the drill. "What's really going on?" Caleb told him about the crew and the water turn. Grant listened without interruption, which was how Caleb knew he was worried. Finally, Grant said, "You don't need irrigation. You told me land was land." "It is. Dry land, apparently. Don't start diverting water just to prove a point." Caleb felt something settle inside him, small and stubborn. "I haven't decided what I'm doing. Good. But the gravel needs to be gone by Thursday." Grant studied him, then the photograph. "You're enjoying this." Caleb almost denied it. A little. He slept badly that afternoon, worked his shift, and spent the night moving 50-pound sacks while his shoulders argued with him. At 6:30 Thursday morning, he drove past the turn to his hill. The old flatbed was parked at the main gate off Tilson Road. Delia stood beside it with her gloves tucked into her belt. She looked at Caleb's clean shovel in the truck bed. "That all you brought?" "It's a shovel. It's a garden shovel. What's wrong with gardens?" "Nothing, if we find one." She opened the gate. Beyond it, the lateral disappeared beneath a wall of dead reeds and cottonwood branches. Mateo handed Caleb a long-handled ditch shovel, worn bright at the edge. Try not to step in the settling pocket, he said. Caleb took it. No promises. The first thing Caleb learned was that a ditch shovel was designed to punish anyone who held it like an ordinary shovel. He drove the blade straight down, leaned his weight onto it, and felt the handle kick against his palm. The packed silt barely showed a mark. Mateo took the shovel from him. You're not digging a grave. Good. I didn't dress for one. You dressed for sleep. Caleb looked down at his warehouse sweatshirt and stained jeans. I came directly from work. Mateo set the blade almost flat and slid it beneath the silt. A dark slab peeled away from the channel bottom. Ditch has a shape, he said. Keep the shape. You go straight down, you make holes. Water sits in holes. Mosquitoes appreciate the effort. He handed the shovel back. 20 yards ahead, Delia was cutting dead reeds with a hooked blade. Roy wrestled with the main gate, applying grease from a gun that looked older than Caleb. Warren walked the bank with a roll of orange tape, marking cracks and occasionally stopping to insult the workmanship. You built half of this, Roy called. That's how I recognize bad work. Morning light reached over the cottonwoods slowly, turning the dry reeds gold. The lateral ran along the base of the hill, broad enough that Caleb could have stretched across it if he wanted mud in both ears. Years of leaves and sediment had narrowed the channel to a shallow groove. They worked without music. Delia did not allow headphones because, she said, the ditch gave notice before a bank failed, and only an idiot would choose that moment to listen to a podcast. Caleb found the rhythm after an hour, shaved the bottom, tossed the silt downhill, cut roots without gouging the bank. It was satisfying for approximately 12 minutes. Then his lower back began to burn. By 9, a blister had formed below his right thumb. By 10, it tore. Delia noticed him wrapping it with a strip of shop towel. You bring gloves? He showed her the thin rubber-dotted pair he used at the warehouse. Those are for handling boxes. They're gloves. A shower curtain's technically a coat. She reached into the flatbed and threw him a pair of cracked leather gloves. The fingers were too short, but the palms were smooth from use. Whose are these? Someone with hands. Roy made a choking sound that might have been laughter. Caleb pulled them on. At the main gate, Roy finally got the wheel to turn. It shrieked once and released a stream of rusty water from around the stem. Packing's gone, Roy said. Can you fix it? Caleb asked. I can fix anything except Warren's personality. Warren tied orange tape to a willow branch. Parts are discontinued. They stopped for lunch beneath the cottonwoods. Mateo had brought ham sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper. Delia had hard-boiled eggs and sliced oranges. Roy opened a tin lunchbox containing 2 oatmeal cookies and a can of smoked oysters. That's not lunch, Delia said. It has protein. It has a pull tab. Caleb had a granola bar from the vending machine. Mateo gave him half a sandwich without asking. The 5 of them sat on overturned buckets beside the open channel. Caleb could smell mud now, damp and mineral, though no water had run there that morning. How many places does this feed? He asked. 7, once, Warren said. 4 now. 3 after mine, Delia said. 4 including the row lower ground. That was implied. You imply like an accountant. Delia peeled an egg. The main lateral comes off Bellwether Cooperative's south line, crosses the Pike parcel, then here. Your upper turnout feeds the contour system. Whatever isn't used returns below the 3rd bench and runs to the orchard. Caleb pictured Marin's trees in their exact rows, each with a dark circle around its trunk during irrigation. So, the orchard doesn't lose all of it. No, Delia said, unless your hill drinks more than it used to. It doesn't drink anything now. Dry ground gets greedy. Mateo wiped mustard from his thumb. First flow will disappear. Second might make it halfway. Takes time for a ditch to remember. Dirt doesn't remember, Roy said. Says the man who talks to pumps. Pumps respond. Because you hit them. Sometimes that's the language. Caleb looked at Delia. Did Amos come to these clearing days? Her eggshell cracked between her fingers. Once upon a time. Meaning, finish your sandwich. Warren watched her for a moment, then pointed his cookie at Caleb. Your grandfather was strong when he was young. Delia stood and brushed eggshell from her palm. So are mules. Lunch was over. They cleared nearly half a mile before reaching Caleb's western fence. Wild rose had swallowed the crossing. Its canes caught sleeves and hair, and it produced thorns shaped with personal malice. Delia cut from the ditch bottom, while Caleb dragged branches uphill. He pulled too hard on one, and freed it suddenly. The cane lashed across his cheek. Mateo winced. The hill signed him. Caleb touched the thin line of blood. Does that mean I can leave? It means it knows where to find you. Beyond the rose thicket lay the upper turnout. The iron gate was buried to its frame. Roy and Mateo dug around it while Caleb and Warren cleared the return channel. Delia inspected the stonework, pushing her fingers into gaps. "Bank's soft here," she said. "It's dry as concrete," Caleb answered. "On top." She drove a narrow steel rod into the bank. It sank farther than Caleb expected. When she pulled it out, the bottom 6 inches were dark. "Seepage?" he asked. "Old animal burrow. Maybe roots rotted out. We pack it before tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? We put in a test flow." Caleb glanced up the hill toward his trailer, a small white rectangle in the distance. "I thought my water turn started Friday night. That is tomorrow." His night shift had blurred the week. "Right." Delia studied him. "You still want it?" "I haven't seen water yet." That wasn't the question. Before he could answer, Grant's pickup rolled down the access road. He stopped above them and stepped out wearing a tool belt. 2 white respirator marks cut across the dust on his face. "What are you doing at the fence?" he asked. "Cleaning the lateral," Caleb said. "I can see that. Then we're both having a good day." Grant ignored him and looked at Delia. "You're Delia Velez. You're in my light." Grant moved 1 step sideways before realizing he had obeyed. "I told my guys to look at that gravel," he said to Caleb. "They didn't move it. They're replacing a roof, and Thursday arrived anyway." Grant's jaw worked. "There's an excavator coming Monday. We'll pull it out then. Water comes tomorrow. Delay it." Delia fitted a plank into the turnout frame. "Water doesn't work for your contractor." Grant's attention shifted to the gate. "If you open that, what happens to the lower orchard?" "Depends how much the hill takes." "Marin know?" Caleb wiped his blade on the grass. "I told her. That's not what I asked. It's her orchard. Ask her yourself." Grant looked past him at the cleared channel, the blue cloth markers climbing the barren slope, and the crew's tools spread along the bank. His irritation changed into something closer to unease. "Caleb, can I talk to you?" "You are." "Alone?" Delia lifted the plank and dropped it back into its slot. The crack echoed off the stones. "We're done here for today." She gathered the tools without hurrying. Mateo and Roy followed. Warren climbed into the truck only after Caleb gave him back the folding chair cushion that had somehow ended up behind the seat. Grant waited until the flatbed rattled away. "What's the goal?" he asked. "Water?" "For what? I own land. Land takes water." "You explained land to me. Quit using everything I said against me. Say better things." Grant bent, picked up a broken piece of rose cane, and threw it aside. "You're angry. Fine. You should be." The will was lopsided. Caleb had wanted to hear that in the attorney's parking lot. Now it sounded like the opening line of a negotiation. "But opening an old turnout doesn't make the hill useful," Grant continued. "You don't have money for planting. You don't have equipment. You've never managed a crop." Neither had Marin before she inherited one. She worked with Amos on the orchard accounts. I worked with Amos on everything else. The words came out louder than Caleb intended. A magpie startled from the fence. Grant's face tightened. Taking care of him wasn't a business plan. No. It was just the thing that made your business plans possible. Neither of them moved. Grant looked toward the farmhouse, though the roof was hidden by the lower rise. "The excavator comes Monday. That's the fastest I can move the gravel." Caleb drove the ditch shovel into the blocked edge and lifted a load by hand. "Then, I'll start now." Grant watched him throw the gravel downhill. "You're going to wreck your back." Apparently, it wasn't listed in the will. For 3 seconds, Caleb thought Grant might leave. Instead, his brother removed his tool belt, set it in the pickup bed, and took the second shovel. They worked together for 40 minutes without speaking. Grant loosened the larger pieces with a mattock while Caleb cleared them. It was the first thing they had done side by side since lifting Amos from the bathroom floor after a fall the previous winter. That night, Grant had stayed until 2 in the morning, then disappeared for 3 weeks. When the channel was open enough for a narrow flow, Grant dropped his shovel. "That's all I've got." Caleb nodded. "Thanks." Grant put on his tool belt. "Don't make me regret it. You could just say you're welcome. I could." He drove away. Friday evening, the crew returned with headlamps, sandbags, and Roy's toolbox. Caleb had slept 2 hours after work. His hands throbbed inside Delia's borrowed gloves. At 7:40, Delia opened the main gate. Water entered the lateral in a low brown push, carrying leaves and white foam. Caleb walked beside it as it advanced. In the dry sections, the first inch vanished immediately. The water darkened the channel, paused, then moved again. At the upper turnout, Roy worked the rusted stem with a wrench. It resisted, gave a metallic groan, and rose half an inch. A thin sheet slipped beneath the gate. Caleb followed it through the rose crossing and onto his property. The flow crawled around the first curve, soaking into dust. Mateo opened a checkbox farther ahead. Warren stood on the bank with a flashlight aimed at the water, as if directing an aircraft. "It's stopping," Caleb said. "Wait," Delia answered. The channel filled behind it. Water climbed over a small ridge of silt and moved another foot. Caleb felt an absurd urge to cheer. Instead, he walked ahead, clearing leaves with his shovel. The dark line traveled across ground that had been pale and hard that morning. Then Delia shouted from behind him. Not his name. Just, "Move." A section of bank sagged near the old gate. Water punched through it in a brown fist. Caleb jumped aside. The breach widened instantly, pouring downhill outside the channel. His trailer sat directly below. He ran. Loose basalt rolled beneath his boots. Behind him, Mateo and Roy shouted for boards. Delia yelled to close the turnout. Caleb reached the trailer as the first muddy stream struck the uphill tire, split around it, and disappeared beneath the floor. For one hopeful second, he thought the trailer might divert it. Then the soft patch by the door gave way, and brown water surged inside. Caleb yanked the trailer door open and caught the saucepan with his shin as it floated past. Water covered the floor in a thin, fast-moving sheet. It came through the softened seam beneath the dinette, carrying silt, dead grass, and one cigarette butt that had probably been waiting since 1994 for this opportunity. His work boots lay beside the bed. He grabbed them by their laces and threw them onto the counter. The cardboard box of Amos's things sat beneath the table. Caleb reached it just as the bottom collapsed. Reading glasses, pocket knives, buttons, gloves, and the brass bell spilled into the muddy water. He dropped to his knees and began scooping. A jar rolled under the bench. One of the knives disappeared through the broken section of floor. Outside, men shouted over the water. The trailer shifted, not far, an inch, maybe two. Enough to make the cabinets creak and Caleb's stomach rise into his throat. "Caleb!" Delia struck the outer wall. "Get out!" He grabbed the bell, the glasses, and one of Amos's gloves. The mattress had begun absorbing water from below, its blue fabric darkening steadily along one edge. Now! Caleb climbed through the door, carrying an armful of wet objects. Delia seized the back of his sweatshirt and pulled him clear as Mateo and Roy shoved sandbags into the stream. Warren stood farther uphill, leaning his full weight on the turnout wheel. "Gate's not closing," Warren called. "Stem slipped," Roy answered. It opened. "It can close. Tell it that." Water cut a fresh groove down the slope. Mateo laid a plank across the breach while Delia packed mud against it with the flat of her shovel. The plank jumped under the pressure. Caleb set Amos's things on the truck hood and grabbed a sandbag. Delia blocked him with her arm. "Check the trailer supports. My stuff's in there. If it rolls, your stuff goes with it." "Check the supports." The uphill stabilizer, Jack had sunk nearly 4 inches. Caleb found 2 pieces of firewood beneath the trailer and wedged them under the frame. The next surge spread around his ankles, filling his boots. "Turnout's down!" Warren shouted. The flow weakened slowly. For another minute, water continued draining from the channel above the breach. Mateo and Roy packed the bank while Delia drove the narrow steel rod into the ground, testing the repair. Only when the stream thinned to a trickle did anyone stop moving. Caleb stood beside the trailer, breathing through his mouth. Mud coated his jeans from the knees down. The cut on his cheek had opened again, and his torn blister burned beneath the wet glove. Roy lifted one of the stabilizer jacks, watched it settle, and lowered it again. Frames still square. "Fantastic," Caleb said. "I was worried my flooded onion box might be crooked." No one laughed. Delia removed her gloves, finger by finger. "I told you the bank was soft." Caleb stared at her. She looked at the breach, then at the trailer. "I should have opened it slower." "You think?" Mateo wiped both hands on his shirt. "We all missed it." I didn't even know what I was looking at. That doesn't make it Delia alone. I didn't say it did. You said it with your face. My face is standing in mud beside everything I own. Mateo's mouth closed. Warren limped toward the truck hood and began collecting Amos's things. He laid the reading glasses on his sleeve, folded it over them, and placed the bundle in the driest corner of the flatbed. Caleb saw him pick up the brass bell. Careful. Warren turned it over in his palm. Mud filled the seam around the handle. This Amos's? Yes. Warren pressed the little clapper with his thumb. It made a dull, wet click. Figures, he said. What figures? Nothing. You all keep doing that. Doing what? Saying half a thing and acting like I heard the rest. Delia looked toward the open trailer door. This isn't the time. When is? Thursday at 7? She held his gaze. Behind her, the last of the water crawled harmlessly into the grass. We get you dry first, she said. Caleb wanted to tell them to leave. He wanted them to take their shovels, their old grudges, and their 6 hours of muddy water down the hill. But the trailer floor sagged beneath the dinette, and his mattress made a sucking sound when Mateo tried to lift it. They carried it outside together. The bottom half was too heavy to maneuver. Roy took out a pocket knife and cut through the fabric. Brown water poured from the foam. There goes the resale value, he said. Caleb laughed despite himself. It came out wrong, close to a sob, so he bent to grab the other end. They propped the mattress against the trailer. Mateo removed the dinette bench and laid it in the dry grass. Delia swept mud through the broken floor with a push broom she found tied beneath the flatbed. Warren cleaned Amos's glasses with bottled water. A pair of headlights climbed the access road. Maren arrived first in her pickup. Grant came behind her, still in his work clothes. They parked side by side and stood looking at the mud, the gutted trailer, and the mattress leaning against it. Grant's gaze traveled up to the breached channel. What happened? Caleb dropped the bench seat. I installed a pool. Maren walked past him into the trailer. Oh, Caleb. He hated the softness in her voice. It looks worse than it is. The floor gave a small crunch under her shoe. Grant crouched near the tire. Did it shift? Roy says the frame's square. Roy also said the upper gate would hold, Caleb answered. Roy accepted that without protest. Maren came out carrying the work boots Caleb had thrown onto the counter. One had fallen sole first into the muddy sink. You can't stay here. I can after it dries. It won't dry tonight. I work tonight. You can't go to work like that. Caleb looked down at himself. They sell hoses. You're coming home with me. Which home? He asked before he could stop himself. Maren flinched. Grant stood. You can use the farmhouse, Grant said. For a few nights. Aren't I an insurance complication? Don't do that. What? Take help and sharpen it. Caleb pulled off Delia's gloves. Mud had worked through the seams and turned his palms gray. I didn't ask you to come up here. No, Grant said. Maren saw the water from the packing shed. The orchard got its share after all. Grant glanced toward Delia. Was this because of the crushed section? No, she said. Different bank. His shoulders eased. The movement was tiny, but Caleb saw it. Good, Caleb said. Glad that's settled. Maren pushed the work boots against his chest. Stop trying to make everyone feel as bad as you do. The words struck cleanly. She regretted them at once, but Caleb had already taken the boots. Excellent plan, he said. Go home. Caleb, all of you. Delia picked up her shovel. We should give him room. Grant looked prepared to argue. Maren touched his elbow, and he let her steer him toward the trucks. Roy stayed beside Caleb. You too, Caleb said. I have a spare room. I'm not staying with a stranger. Roy considered that. Fair. I snore. I'm serious. So am I. It's impressive. Caleb sat on the trailer step. Mud seeped from beneath it in narrow brown threads. Roy took a business card from his wallet. It advertised Pennington Pump and Motor Repair in faded blue letters. Someone had crossed out the old phone number and written another beneath it. Door sticks, Roy said. Lift and shove. Bed's clean enough. I'll leave the porch light on. He placed the card beside Caleb and walked away. Caleb called the warehouse and told his supervisor his home had flooded. There was a long silence. You live on the hill, the supervisor said. Yes. Was it raining? Not where I was. Another silence. Caleb could hear pallet jacks and the electronic chirp of a forklift in the background. You have any sick time? 3 hours. You used 8 in January, then I have 3. You need to be here by 11. Caleb looked at the mattress, the broken floor, and Amos's glove drying alone on the truck hood. I'll be there. Delia drove the others down the hill. Caleb did not use Roy's card. He changed into his least muddy clothes, shoved newspaper inside his wet work boots, and left them beneath the trailer. He wore sneakers to the warehouse and spent the shift limping because the right sole had separated at the toe. At dawn, Grant waited beside Caleb's truck in the employee parking lot. Caleb slowed when he saw him. Did Marin put a tracker on me? You work the same schedule every week. That's less exciting. Grant held out a paper cup of coffee. Caleb took it because refusing coffee required more energy than he possessed. I've been thinking, Grant said. Dangerous before 7. The hill isn't workable for you. Not right now. Caleb drank. It was sweet and pale, exactly the way Grant liked it, and nothing like Caleb's order. You drove here to review my agricultural prospects? I drove here because you slept in your truck during lunch break. Were you watching? I know people on nights. Of course you do. Grant took a breath. I'll give you $5,000 for the parcel. Caleb stopped with the cup halfway to his mouth. It's not an insult, Grant said quickly. It needs road work, power, drainage, all of it. I'd be taking on a problem. You're offering $82 an acre. I'm offering cash now. You could get an apartment, pay off the trailer, get back on your feet. What would you do with it? Stabilize the slope. Keep it with the property. The property meaning your house and Marin's orchard, the family place. Caleb looked at his brother's clean truck, then at his own, where Amos's muddy box sat on the passenger floor. $5,000 was more money than he had ever held at one time. It was also low enough that Grant had probably chosen it because Caleb was tired. How long do I have to decide? Grant tried not to look relieved. Take the weekend. Caleb drove back to the hill with the paper cup in the holder, and Grant's offer moving through his mind like a song he disliked but could not stop hearing. The trailer smelled of wet foam. He set Amos's box in the sun, spread the buttons on a towel, and found the brass bell beneath Warren's folded sleeve. Its clapper moved again after he rinsed it, producing one thin, familiar ring. Caleb sat on the step and stared across the ruined channel. Below the breach, where the water had spread before reaching the trailer, the ground had changed color. Dark ribbons followed contours he had never noticed before. Something green showed between 2 stones. He assumed it was a weed until he crouched and found 3 more shoots spaced in a line, each pushed through the wet soil from a woody crown buried underneath. Caleb touched one with his finger. The leaves were small, folded, and alive. The shoots were not random. Caleb followed them east, crouching every few yards to brush mud from another small cluster. Some appeared as tight green curls. Others had already opened into 3-part leaves. They ran along the darkened line below the old channel, vanished where the ground rose, then appeared again near the stones Delia had called a spillway. He took pictures from 6 angles, all of which looked like pictures of dirt. The number on Roy's card rang 8 times. If this is about a pump, Roy said, turn off the breaker first. It's Caleb. Then turn off the breaker anyway. Builds character. There's something growing up here. That happens outdoors, in a line. Roy went quiet. Little leaves, Caleb said, 3 on each stem. They came up where the water spread. Alfalfa, maybe. How long does alfalfa stay alive underground? That depends on how stubborn it is. Apparently this is row alfalfa. Roy asked where Caleb had found it, then told him not to dig anything until he got there. Caleb pointed out that he owned the dirt. Congratulations, Roy said. Don't dig it. He arrived 40 minutes later, wearing bedroom slippers and carrying a mug that said, World's okayest uncle. Dahlia's flatbed followed him up the track, with Mateo beside her and Warren in the back. You called the entire department? Caleb asked. I called Delia, Roy said. And I called competent people, Delia said. Warren climbed down with a groan. She called us. They gathered around the nearest shoots. Delia pinched one leaf, smelled her fingers, and nodded. Alfalfa. That's it, Caleb said. What were you hoping for? I don't know. A plant with a better resale value. Mateo knelt and used a hand trowel to loosen the soil around the crown. A thick, pale root continued deeper than the length of the blade. Old stand, he said. Very old. Caleb looked across the slope. How old? Could be 30 years. Could be more. Roots go deep if they get established. Delia had already walked toward the line of stones. She removed a glove and pressed her fingertips to a bare, gray stick protruding from the soil. That one isn't alfalfa. It looked dead. Caleb would have stepped on it without noticing. Delia scraped the bark lightly with her thumbnail. A narrow stroke of green appeared beneath. Pear rootstock, she said. Caleb crouched beside her. 3 more woody stubs stood nearby, each cut off a few inches above the ground. They had been gnawed and weathered until they blended with the brush. You're sure? I planted them. The hill seemed to become quiet around that sentence. Roy sipped from his mug. Mateo looked down at his hands. Warren wandered toward the breach, as if the condition of the bank had suddenly become urgent. Caleb touched the green line beneath the bark. When? 1997. Some in 98. I was a toddler. Congratulations again. Why pears? They handle this ground better than apples. Amos wanted apples anyway. That sounds like him? It does. Delia replaced her glove and started uphill. Caleb followed. How many did you plant? 312. He looked at the rabbit brush, the dead grass, the scattered gray stubs. Where are they? Mostly dead? Helpful. You asked. She stopped on the second contour, where a low shelf crossed the slope. Once Caleb stood on it, he could see that the shelf was too even to be natural. It had been cut into the hill, narrow but continuous. We shaped 6 benches, Delia said. Put in checks so we could flood one section at a time. Pears on the lower 3, windbreak on the upper edge, alfalfa between rows to hold the soil. We, the crew, for Amos, for the project. That sounds like a distinction. It became one. Caleb waited. Delia bent to pull cheatgrass from around a surviving crown. She laid the grass in a tidy pile. Did he hire you to build it? Yes. That's not the whole answer? No. Behind them, Mateo and Roy began removing the failed bank. Warren used the steel rod to probe the soil, marking soft places with orange tape. Delia watched them work. People had ideas for the benches, she said. Mateo wanted onions. Warren was going to try lavender because a woman he was dating liked it. Warren called from below. She married a dentist. You still planted the lavender. Deer ate it. Even the deer knew. Warren lifted one hand without turning around. Delia's mouth softened briefly. There were people on that crew who didn't own ground. Amos talked about leasing them sections, small pieces, enough for market crops. We'd maintain the system and build the orchard at the same time. Did he put that in writing? No. Caleb thought of Mr. Baines, of documents arranged in neat stacks, of Grant asking 6 questions before anyone left the conference room, so he changed his mind. Things changed first. Drought came hard. The lower apples were already producing. These trees weren't. Amos moved every turn he could downhill. For one season? The first time, that's what he said. A dry wind moved up the slope, carrying the smell of wet cardboard from Caleb's trailer. Why did all of you leave? Delia looked at him. Because asking once was a hard season. Asking twice was a pattern. By the 3rd year, we understood the arrangement. Caleb heard the part she had left out. He blamed you. He said people who didn't own land had become confused about who made the decisions. The words sounded so precisely like Amos that Caleb could hear his voice delivering them. Flat, impatient, almost reasonable. Were you confused? Caleb asked. No. She walked down toward the breach. They spent the afternoon rebuilding the bank properly. Mateo cut away the collapsed section until they reached firm soil. Roy fitted a short length of perforated pipe into the old burrow, so trapped seepage could drain without tunneling through the bank. They packed damp clay in layers, each one no thicker than Delia's palm. Caleb wanted to heap everything in at once. Delia made him remove half of it. Thin layers hold. It's dirt. So is the hill. You saw what happened when it moved. At noon, Morin arrived with sandwiches, bottled water, and the space heater Caleb had refused. She placed it inside the open trailer without comment. She noticed the green line in the mud immediately. Is that alfalfa? Apparently. Morin walked the wet contour, counting shoots under her breath. At the pear stub, she crouched the way Delia had and scraped a different spot with her nail. Still green. Delia planted it. Morin looked over at the older woman who was tamping clay with the blunt end of a tool. Grandpa never told us. He told us the hill was a mistake. He said the soil was wrong. He moved the water. Marin stood. Her expression became guarded. The lower orchard was his income. It was other people's work. Both can be true. Caleb glanced at her. You knew? No. I knew the drought years were bad. I knew he stopped the upper project. I didn't know about the leases. They weren't leases, Delia said without looking up. They were conversations. Marin's cheeks colored. I didn't mean conversations are worth what the people having them are worth to each other. No one spoke for a moment. Mateo took the bag of sandwiches from Marin. Turkey and roast beef. Then we can still be a society. They ate beside the trailer. Marin sat on an overturned bucket and asked practical questions about the bank, the return flow, and how much water the first turn had used before the failure. Delia answered her precisely. Whatever anger stood between them belonged to the past, but Delia did not place it on Marin's shoulders. Caleb envied that restraint. When Marin prepared to leave, she handed him a folded paper. What's this? A list of what I can spare. 2 rolls of half-inch line, some stakes, old emitters. If you decide to plant anything. He did not unfold it. Grant offered me $5,000 for the hill. Marin's face went still. You knew. He mentioned he might. When? After the flood. So while I was standing here covered in mud. He thinks he's helping. He always thinks that. Marin looked toward the repaired bank. Are you considering it? Yes. It was the truth, and it hurt her more than he expected. She rubbed her thumb along the edge of the sandwich bag. 5 is too low. How generous would you be? I didn't say I wanted it. You want the water. I want the orchard to survive. So did Omos. Marin flinched as if he had raised his hand. Caleb regretted it immediately. He looked down at the folded list. I'm sorry. She nodded once. You should be. I still don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. She opened her truck door. That's not the same as doing nothing. After she left, Caleb found Delia cleaning tools on the flatbed. Was the hill the last thing left? He asked. Delia continued wiping clay from the steel rod. In the will? Yes, I wouldn't know. You knew Amos. I knew him at work. You knew what he thought of this place. She set down the rod. Caleb heard how childish the question would sound before he asked it, but asked anyway. Do you think he left it to me because he thought I could finish it? Delia's face changed. The toughness did not leave it. Something gentler came up underneath. No, she said. Caleb stared past her at the slope. I think Amos rewarded what he understood. Grant has the house because Grant talks about buildings. Marin has the orchard because she talks numbers and fruit. You took care of an old man who didn't know how to put a value on being taken care of. Caleb's throat tightened. So I got what he didn't want. You got what he didn't finish. That may be the same thing. It would have been easier if she had lied. If she had turned Amos into a difficult prophet who had secretly recognized Caleb's worth. Instead, she gave him the old man exactly as he had been. Caleb unfolded Marin's list. The paper shook once in the wind. He flattened it against his thigh. What could actually grow here? He asked. Delia looked up the hill, following the buried contours with her eyes. That depends. On money, some. Water, a lot. What else? Whether you want Amos's orchard or your own. Caleb looked at the surviving pear stub, then at the trailer with its broken floor and mattress drying like an enormous dirty flag. Grant's $5,000 could buy a clean room, dry boots, and several months in which no one expected him to repair the past. He took out his phone. Grant answered on the second ring. Hey, I'm not selling. A pause followed. You've thought about it? All day. That's not very long. It was long up here. Grant exhaled. This is because of the water. No, it's because you offered while the mud was still wet. That doesn't make the land worth more. Maybe not. Then what are you doing? Caleb looked at Delia. She had picked up the steel rod again, waiting without appearing to wait. I don't know yet, he said. But I'm going to find out before I let you decide for me. Grant's silence lasted long enough for Caleb to hear a cabinet door slam somewhere in the farmhouse. I'm not deciding for you, Grant said. You made an offer. That's not the same thing. It felt similar from this end. I was trying to get you out of a bad situation, by getting the hill, by giving you cash. Caleb watched Mateo press a final layer of clay into the repaired bank. You can keep the offer, I heard you. Grant hung up. Caleb lowered the phone. He expected to feel triumphant. Instead, He felt the loss of $5,000 with astonishing clarity. It became a clean apartment he would not rent, a truck payment that would remain due, a mattress that did not smell like a riverbank. Delia hooked the steel rod onto the flatbed. That was a poor reason not to sell. He stared at her. "You want me to sell? I want you to know the difference between choosing something and refusing your brother. I can do both. You can. Doesn't mean you did." Roy climbed into the driver's side of his truck. "She gets philosophical when she's tired. I get accurate. See?" Caleb folded Myron's supply list and put it in his pocket. "You asked if I wanted Amos's orchard or mine. I did. I want to know what mine would cost." Delia looked at the hill again. "More than 5,000. Thank you. This has been encouraging. You asked for accurate. I'm starting to understand why Grandpa didn't get along with you." Mateo stopped winding a rope and looked between them. Then Delia laughed. It was not a polite laugh. It came out loud and abrupt, startling a pair of magpies from the fence. Mateo grinned. Even Warren turned around. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow morning, we walk the benches. I work tonight. You worked last night. I work most nights. That's how employment works. Then tomorrow afternoon, I'll be asleep. Monday morning, working." Delia put both hands on her hips. "When are you available?" Caleb thought about his schedule, the trailer, and the 3 hours of sick time that no longer existed. 7:20 in the morning if nothing goes wrong at the warehouse. Something always goes wrong at a warehouse. You sound familiar with employment. She gave him a look that could have dried paint. 7:20. The crew left. Caleb carried the space heater Marin had brought into the trailer, stared at its plug, then carried it back outside. He had no use for it unless he parked beside the packing shed, and he was not prepared to drag the trailer downhill after spending a day preventing it from going there on its own. Roy's business card remained on the step. Caleb called at 10 that night, after the temperature dropped and the damp mattress began giving off a smell like old gym towels. Roy answered with, "Door sticks." His house stood behind the shuttered Pennington Pump and Motor Repair Shop on the east side of Bellwether. The shop sign had lost the last 2 letters of repair, making it appear that Roy specialized in something called REP-AI. Roy's spare room contained a narrow bed, a dresser missing 1 drawer, and 11 frame photographs of antique engines. Caleb slept for almost 10 hours. When he woke, a pair of clean socks lay outside the bedroom door with a note. Not a gift. Structural loan. Roy sat at the kitchen table, rebuilding a small carburetor on yesterday's newspaper. The room smelled of coffee and solvent. "Your bathroom faucet leaks," Caleb said. "I know. You repair pumps. I'm retired. You're repairing one now. This is a carburetor, so retirement has boundaries." Roy pushed a mug toward him. "Delia says you want a plant." Delia gets ahead of reality. Reality's slow. She hates waiting. Caleb sat. He had not planned to discuss the hill before coffee. "I want to know whether planting is possible. Anything's possible if you misunderstand the cost. Does everyone on this crew talk like a hardware store fortune cookie? We had a long time to practice." Caleb turned the mug between his hands. "Why did you come back? To the ditch? To Amos's property?" Roy fit a brass needle into the carburetor. His fingers were broad and scarred, but they handled the piece delicately. "Water was slowing below the row place," he said. "Delia saw the obituary, figured the property might change hands, and somebody had better locate the upper owner. That's all? What else would it be? I don't know. Closure? Revenge? One last chance to tell Amos he was a bastard. Would have had to come 11 days earlier for that." Roy examined the needle. Amos wasn't a bastard every day. That made it harder. Caleb looked into his coffee. "He paid on time," Roy continued. "If somebody's truck died, he helped. If you made a mistake, he remembered until the sun burned out. If he made one, the subject got complicated. That sounds like every day to me." Roy smiled without amusement. "Go fix my faucet." Caleb did. In return, Roy helped him replace the rotten section of trailer floor with a piece of marine plywood left over from repairing a boat. Roy refused payment, then accepted the softest of Amos's pocket knives after Caleb sharpened and cleaned it. "Structural loan," Caleb said. "Exactly." At 7:20 Monday morning, Delia waited beside the first bench holding a clipboard. Mateo carried a soil auger made from a length of pipe and welded handles. Warren had brought flags in 4 colors. "You said walk," Caleb said. "This looks organized. Walking without organization is wandering." They sampled soil along each contour. The upper benches were shallow and full of rock. The lower ones held more silt, though the auger struck basalt before Mateo's knee at every location. "Fruit trees?" Caleb asked. "Some," Delia said. "Not 312. Alfalfa? You don't own equipment to cut it. Vegetables? Wind will sandblast lettuce. Corn?" All 3 of them looked at him. "What?" "I'm listing plants." Warren pushed an orange flag into the ground. "List pineapples next," Delia wrote as they walked. "Hardy pears on the deeper lower bench. Serviceberry and windbreak shrubs above. Perennial herbs where the soil was shallow. A small nursery bed near the trailer, where Caleb could watch it, and where water pressure was easiest to manage. You grow rootstock in beds," she said. "Sell it bare root after it goes dormant. To who? People who need rootstock. That market sounds enormous. First you learn to keep 10 alive. The numbers were less funny. Used half-inch line would cost more than Caleb's next truck payment. Stakes, fittings, filters, seed, compost, fencing. Even with Marin's spare supplies, he could not afford 1 full bench. Delia drew a line beneath her estimate. Start with the water. Nothing else matters if the delivery doesn't work. For 6 evenings, Caleb cleared the first contour after sleeping through the hottest part of the day. He removed rabbit brush by hand because he had no machinery. The roots resisted until they released suddenly, throwing him backward. He learned to sit down before the hill chose for him. Marin left the promised rolls of line beside his trailer. She also brought a box of mismatched emitters, most clogged with mineral deposits. "You said old," Caleb told her. "I didn't say good." They soaked them in vinegar at the packing shed. Marin tested each emitter, while Caleb sorted fittings. "The upper turn reduces what comes to the orchard," she said without looking up. "There it is. I'm not asking you not to use it. What are you asking?" "That we measure. If the hill absorbs everything, I need to change my schedule." Caleb rolled an emitter between his fingers. "Delia says the unused water returns below the 3rd bench. Once the channels seal, eventually. My trees can't wait for eventually." Neither could Caleb's bank account. Marin pushed a working emitter into the good pile. "I can shift the south rows to mornings. Less evaporation. Would that cover it?" "Some." Caleb looked at her inventory sheet, covered in neat columns and small corrections. "You want help checking the lower gates?" She looked up, surprised. "I know enough now to be dangerous," he said. "You were already dangerous." Together they walked the lower orchard after sunset. 2 wooden checks leaked around their edges. A valve near the packing shed would not close completely. Water seeped from a coupling beneath the grass, creating a soft patch Marin had blamed on poor drainage. Caleb knelt and dug around it with his hands. "You're losing more here than my entire turn." "I doubt that." "So, measure." She did. The next morning, she arrived on the hill carrying a new filter, still in its package. "This isn't from the spare box," Caleb said. "No, I can't pay for it. You found the leak. That wasn't a trade. It is now." He wanted to refuse. Then he thought of Delia saying that refusal was not the same as choosing. "Thank you," he said. Marin nodded. "Don't make it strange." The second water turn began after dark on Sunday. They opened the turnout by inches. Roy monitored the repaired stem. Delia walked the bank with her steel rod. Mateo stayed ahead of the flow, removing debris. Warren sat near the trailer with a flashlight and announced that he had been assigned to protect the structural integrity of Caleb's folding chair. Water entered the first contour. It moved faster than before. The channel had darkened and tightened after the first soaking, though thirsty patches still swallowed the leading edge. Caleb followed it with a shovel, heart rising each time the flow rounded another curve. At the repaired bank, the water climbed. Everyone watched the damp line on the new clay. It held. The flow continued past the place where it had broken, along the contour beneath the trailer, and toward the surviving pear stubs. One by one, Mateo adjusted the checks, spreading the water into a broad, shallow sheet. The old alfalfa bowed beneath it and lifted again. Caleb crouched beside the pear rootstock Delia had uncovered. Water touched the base, divided around the woody stem, and filled the small basin beyond. "That's 600 feet, Roy said. 618, Warren called from the chair. "You didn't measure." "I remember. You remember things that never happened." Delia stood beside Caleb, her boots in the mud. "Don't celebrate yet," she said. "We've got 5 more contours." Caleb watched the water settle into the ground. "Can I celebrate this one?" She considered the question. For 1 minute. He stayed crouched for the full 60 seconds, listening to water move through a place everyone had called dead. Delia gave him 74 seconds. Then she nudged his shoulder with the handle of her shovel. Second check. Caleb stood reluctantly. "You said a minute. I gave you interest." They moved down the contour, opening each check just enough to spread water without letting it gather force. The work was slower than turning a valve and watching a sprinkler. Water had to be persuaded around stones, stopped where it wanted to rush, and released where it wanted to sit. Caleb began to understand why the old crew spoke about the lateral, as if it had opinions. By midnight, the first bench was dark from end to end. The second remained dry. "Next turn," Delia said. "Can't we open it now? We could also take the main gate off and flood Bellwether." "I'm asking a reasonable question. You've been awake 30 hours, 28. That explains the math." Caleb wanted to argue, but when he bent to pick up his shovel, the ground tilted. Mateo took the tool from him. "You're done." "I'm fine." "Good." "Be fine horizontally." He slept in Roy's spare room again, because the trailer floor still smelled damp when the nights turned cold. He woke to the sound of metal striking metal and found Roy in the shop dismantling an irrigation pump the size of a washing machine. A wiry man named Ellis Barrow stood beside it, with both hands in his coat pockets. He grew pears south of town and had the suspicious expression of someone who believed every repair estimate should be argued with on principle. Roy introduced Caleb as the new Roe. Ellis looked him over. "There was something wrong with the old one?" "Terminal condition," Roy said. Ellis did not smile. "Which piece did you get?" "The upper hill." "Oh." Caleb had come to recognize that, "oh," it meant the speaker had briefly expected a better answer. Roy removed a rusted clamp. "Caleb's thinking of raising rootstock." "Thinking's cheap," Ellis said. "That's why I can afford it." Ellis looked at him again, this time more carefully. "Pear? And serviceberry. Maybe herbs." "You ever graft?" "No." "Ever bud?" "No." "Ever dig a nursery row?" "I've dug a ditch. That wasn't my question." Caleb leaned against the workbench. "Did you arrive knowing everything, or did somebody tolerate you first?" Roy's wrench stopped. Ellis stared at Caleb for a long moment. Then he pulled one hand from his pocket and pointed a thick finger at him. "Bartlett seedling's cheap, but it's too variable. Old Home by Farmingdale if you can find clean stock. Don't buy anything from a man named Virgil in Toppenish, even if he swears on his mother. What did Virgil do? Sold me quince labeled as pear. Maybe he had poor handwriting. Virgil doesn't write. That's part of the problem." By the time Ellis left, Caleb had an invitation to visit his nursery block and no clear indication whether the man liked him. "He does," Roy said. "How can you tell?" "He didn't mention Virgil until his 3rd year with me." Roy had a stack of used half-inch line behind the shop, sun-faded but intact. Caleb offered to buy it. "You can't afford it. That doesn't mean it's free." Roy nodded toward the dismantled pump. "Clean the housing. Wire wheel, no grinding. Don't touch the seal seat. How long?" "Until it's clean." Caleb spent his next 2 mornings at the shop. Roy paid him in pipe, fittings, and a second-hand filter, larger than the one Marin had brought. The filter leaked around its cap. Caleb replaced the gasket with one cut from a sheet of rubber Amos had kept beneath the farmhouse workbench. Grant had thrown the sheet into a construction dumpster. Caleb retrieved it after dark. He did not tell Grant. On the 3rd water turn, they opened the 2nd contour. On the 4th, the 3rd. The hill absorbed so much that almost nothing reached the old return channel. Marin adjusted her orchard schedule without complaint, though she began texting Caleb the lower flow readings every morning. 1.8-inch drop at South Gate, 1.4 today. Then, "Are you leaving?" Check 2, open after midnight. Caleb was. He closed it 20 minutes earlier, the next turn. The old alfalfa began spreading beyond the original shoots. Small green islands in the brown soil. 5 pair rootstocks produced leaves. One pushed out a thin branch that Delia immediately cut off. Caleb stared at the severed growth. It was alive for a week. It's below the graft. It was trying. So is bindweed. We don't build monuments. He planted his first nursery bed beside the trailer with 50 pair seedlings Ellis sold him at cost. Mateo helped set the spacing. Warren sat on an overturned bucket and criticized the alignment. Third row drifts left. There are 2 rows, Caleb said, planning ahead. The seedlings looked insultingly small after the labor required to put them there. Each was a narrow stem with a modest bundle of roots. Caleb had expected planting to feel like a rival. Mostly it felt like burying money. He installed Marin's emitters and Roy's used line. The first time he opened the filter, grit clogged 11 outlets. The second time, a fitting blew loose and whipped muddy water across his face. The third time, every seedling received a steady drip. Delia inspected the bed. Too much water on the north end. Caleb adjusted the line. Mulch is thin. He added more. You buried that crown. He fixed it. You can say one thing is good, he told her. I can. She walked away. Mateo waited until she was out of earshot. She came up here yesterday when you were at work. For what? To check the seedlings. She didn't say anything. She said 3 things. Nobody was here to hear them. Caleb looked toward Delia, who was clearing a blocked check with the toe of her boot. The trailer became habitable by degrees. Roy helped replace the ruined insulation beneath the dinette. Marin brought a used foam mattress from the packing shed office, where it had served as a break-room cot. It smelled faintly of apples and disinfectant. Grant arrived one evening with lumber in his pickup. I have leftover decking, he said, enough to replace those steps. Caleb looked at the warped 2-step stool beneath the trailer door. They work, the top tread's splitting. I'll fix it. Grant glanced at the seedling rows. You've been busy. Some. What are those? Pear rootstock. You're planting an orchard? No. They're pear trees. They're future lower halves of pear trees. Grant put both hands on his hips. That cleared everything up. Caleb almost smiled. I'll graft them, grow them another season, sell them bare root. To who? People who need rootstock. Grant laughed. It was the same answer Delia had given, but from him it sounded like ridicule. Caleb's face closed. Grant noticed too late. I didn't mean, I'm asking if you have buyers, not yet. Then maybe figure that out before you put more money in. Thank you. There you go again. What? Making everything I say an attack. You offered me $82 an acre. I offered what I thought you needed. You thought I needed to disappear cleanly. Grant stepped back as if Caleb had shoved him. He looked at the lumber in his truck. Do you want this or not? No. Fine. He drove away with the boards. The following night, wind tore 3 seedlings from the ground. Caleb found them at sunrise, roots exposed and leaves shriveled. He stood over them until Delia arrived for the water turn. Say it, he told her. What? That my stakes were wrong. My mulch was thin. I buried something. Your stakes were wrong. Thank you. She knelt beside the least damaged seedling and pruned the torn root. Replant this one deeper. You said not to bury the crown. Deeper roots. Same crown. I have to sleep. So, sleep. I have work. So, work. You make everything sound simple. No, I make it sound next. Together they replanted 2. The third snapped when Caleb lifted it. He threw the dead stem harder than necessary. Delia watched it land. 3 out of 50, she said. 6%. You work at a warehouse too long. 6% is 6%. Then remember, 47 is 94. He built a low windbreak from salvaged orchard netting. Marin supplied better stakes. This time Caleb accepted them without turning gratitude into an argument. As the lower 3 contours began holding moisture, they planted serviceberry starts above the nursery in thyme, sage, and lavender along the shallow shelf near the stone spillway. Mateo knew a restaurant grower named Lena Cho, who bought culinary herbs from small plots and complained constantly about inconsistent supply. She pays? Caleb asked. She complains, then pays. Good combination. She'll visit when something survives long enough to sell. The hill changed subtly. From the road, it remained brown. Up close, green traced the contours. Damp soil stayed cool beneath mulch. Insects appeared around the alfalfa flowers. The surviving pear stubs leafed out enough to cast shadows the size of Caleb's hand. Then Marin's flow messages stopped. Caleb noticed on the morning of the 6th turn. He called twice before she answered. I'm at the south gate, she said. Water noise filled the background. What's the reading? Too low. How low? Half what it was before you opened the third contour. I closed my checks at 2. The orchard didn't recover. Maybe the intake's down. It isn't. Caleb heard Grant say something near her. Is he there? Yes. Put me on speaker. A click followed. Grant's voice came through. Shut the upper turnout for this rotation. No. Caleb, the South Rows are stressed. So were mine for 17 years. This isn't about history. There's fruit on those trees. And roots in my ground. Your seedlings are sticks. Marin said his name sharply. Caleb looked at the 50 emitters ticking water into the soil. 47 seedlings, 6 service berries, rows of herbs too small to harvest, nothing he could sell for months. He touched the old pear rootstock beside him. Measure the leaks again, he said. Change your timing. I'll reduce the last 2 hours, but I'm not closing it. Grant answered before Marin could. You're taking water from a working orchard to prove that hill can grow weeds. Caleb felt the old anger rise, clean and useful. Then Delia's voice came from behind him. Don't answer angry. He turned. She stood on the bank holding the steel rod. Grant said, Caleb? Caleb watched water move through the contour. I'll meet you at the south gate in 30 minutes, he said. We measure everything together. Delia held out her hand. For what? Caleb asked. Phone. He gave it to her. You have 30 minutes, she told Grant. Don't touch the south check until we arrive. Grant's voice sharpened through the speaker. I know how to operate a gate. You know how to open one. That's different. She ended the call and returned Caleb's phone. He's going to love the shared measurement process, Caleb said. He doesn't have to love water. They closed Caleb's third check, marked the level with a stick, and drove down in separate trucks. Delia took the west track. Caleb followed until she turned sharply through Grant's new driveway and stopped. The gravel had been graded into a smooth gray slope from the farmhouse toward the lateral. A shallow ditch ran beside it, ending at the repaired channel where Grant's roofers had crossed. Delia got out. We're going to the orchard, Caleb said. I know. She walked the edge of the driveway, watching the way loose gravel had gathered. Who graded this? Grant's contractor. Where does rain go? Caleb looked uphill. The driveway fell toward them. Here. Where did it go before? Across the grass, I guess. Delia pushed the steel rod into the new roadside ditch. The tip struck compacted gravel. This should turn west before the lateral. It hasn't rained. It will. Grant said he has an excavator coming. He said Monday. That was 3 Mondays ago. Delia tied a strip of orange tape to the nearest fence wire. Caleb laughed. That'll stop a storm. It'll remind me who ignored it. At the south gate, Marin stood beside a measuring staff driven into the channel. Grant leaned against his pickup with his arms folded. You brought Delia, he said. She brought herself. I'm delighted, Delia said. Roy and Mateo arrived behind them in Roy's truck. Grant looked at the group gathering around his sister's orchard. Did you invite the county too? No need, Roy said. They'd just bring cleaner boots. Marin pointed to the staff. The level dropped another 1/8. Delia stepped into the channel wearing knee-high rubber boots. She measured the width at 3 points, timed a floating wood chip between 2 stakes, then made Caleb do it again. Grant checked his watch. You have somewhere to be? Caleb asked. I have contractors inside my house. They seem independent. They moved gravel without you. Marin said, Can we get through one conversation without reopening that? Depends whether the channel does. She gave him a look Amos used to describe as getting the whole family into one eyebrow. They tested the south gate, the return junction, and the line running toward the packing shed. Roy removed the cap from Marin's leaking valve. Mineral scale had built around the seat, preventing it from closing. Mateo dug up the coupling Caleb had found beneath the grass. Water welled from a split along its underside. That's not half the flow, Grant said. No, Caleb agreed. They walked the orchard rows, checking each turnout. 2 wooden checks leaked. 1 standpipe overflowed into a low patch behind the packing shed. Marin wrote every number on her legal pad, pressing so hard that the pencil tore the page. When they returned to the south gate, Delia totaled the losses. Marin's face fell. That still leaves nearly 1/3 unaccounted for. Dry ground, Delia said. Upper channels haven't sealed, so Caleb is taking it. Caleb looked at Grant. The ground is? Through your gate. Yes. That's how irrigation works. Grant pushed away from his truck. then close it until after harvest. Fruit's not ready for harvest for months, Marin said. Then the hill waits. Caleb felt Delia watching him, waiting to see whether he would answer angry. He took Marin's legal pad and drew 3 crooked boxes. Fix the split coupling, clean the valve, replace these 2 checks. Marin shifts the south rows to mornings. I close my turnout 2 hours early until the upper channels seal. Grant looked at the drawing. That doesn't make up a third. No, it makes up most of what's being wasted. The rest gets better each rotation. Or it doesn't. Then we measure again. And if the trees keep stressing? Caleb looked at Marin. She was the one carrying the orchard now, not Grant. Then she and I adjust. Grant's jaw tightened. Interesting. What is? How this became between you and her when the entire property depends on it. Your house doesn't use the lateral. My driveway crosses it. My barn sits below the upper hill. I'm still responsible for this place. You mean in charge of it? I mean somebody has to think beyond 50 sticks in the dirt. The words landed harder because Grant had seen the seedlings. He knew there were 47. Marin lowered her legal pad. Stop. Grant looked at her. You're agreeing with him? I'm agreeing with numbers. His numbers. Mine. Grant laughed once, but there was no humor in it. So, I'm the problem now. No one said that, Marin replied. Delia tied an orange flag to my fence before she even got here. Your driveway drains into the lateral, Delia said. It's dry. Today. The contractor followed the grade. Exactly. Grant turned to Caleb. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Caleb blinked. A split coupling? People standing around telling me I'm wrong on land Grandpa left me. The anger in Grant's voice cracked just enough to reveal something beneath it. Caleb remembered him in the attorney's office, nodding solemnly when he received the farmhouse. Everyone had assumed Grant wanted it because he had asked about cabinets and roofing. No one had asked whether Amos had made the house feel like an honor or an assignment. You could help fix it, Caleb said. I am fixing the house. The driveway needs a diversion before it rains. Then I'll tell the excavator. When? When he's available. That's not a date. Grant took his tool belt from the pickup bed and buckled it around his waist. Neither is your business plan. He drove away. Roy watched the dust settle. That went well. Compared to what? Mateo asked. War. Delia took the legal pad from Caleb. Your boxes are terrible. They're a plan. They're shapes. Marin sat on the tailgate of her pickup and rubbed her forehead. Caleb stood beside her. You okay? I inherited an orchard with failing gates, a half-broken valve, and an irrigation schedule based on water that wasn't mine. You also got a packing shed. She looked at him sideways. Thank you. I'm trying to help. You're shaped like help. He recognized his own words and smiled despite himself. Marin tore the damaged page from her pad and started fresh. I can buy the coupling and valve parts. Not all the checks this month. Roy opened both hands. Why does everyone look at me when a machine is expensive? You have a shop. I have a building full of reasons things are expensive. Mateo knew a grower replacing wooden checks with aluminum ones. The old boards were sound if cut down. He offered to ask. What do you want for them? Marin said. Lunch. For the boards, for helping install them. The boards are ugly. Grant has leftover decking, Caleb said. Marin stared at him. He offered it for my steps. And you refused. He laughed at my seedlings. You are both exhausting. They repaired the coupling that afternoon. Roy cleaned the valve seat while Caleb and Marin cut a new gasket. Mateo returned with 2 old checkboards in his truck, each painted a green that had faded almost gray. He accepted lunch in the form of 3 sandwiches and an apple from cold storage. By sunset, leakage at the south gate had fallen by almost half. Marin stood over the measuring staff. That's better. It was not an apology or a celebration. From her, it was both. Caleb closed his upper turnout 2 hours early as promised. The hill had taken enough to keep the nursery bed damp, but the third contour dried at its far end. 2 service berries wilted before the next turn. He carried buckets from Roy's truck to save them. You could have taken the full 6 hours, Roy said. I said I wouldn't. Promises don't hydrate shrubs. Neither does family cooperation, apparently. Roy poured the last bucket around the weaker plant. Cooperation's like an old pump, makes noise before pressure. Lena Cho visited the hill the following week. She arrived in a small refrigerated van with Sunset Table Produce painted on the side and walked the herb rows carrying a chef's knife in a leather sheath. Caleb had expected a grower in work clothes. Lena wore red-framed glasses, white sneakers without a mark on them, and a linen shirt that somehow remained clean in the dust. Mateo introduced her, then stood back as if he had delivered an inspector. Lena rubbed a sage leaf between her fingers. "You use anything on this?" "Water. I meant sprays." "No. Because you're organic or because you're broke?" "Mostly the second one. Honest farming. Dangerous concept." She tasted thyme, examined the underside of leaves, and paced the length of the row. "How much can you deliver weekly?" "Eventually?" "Eventually doesn't fit on an invoice." Caleb looked at Mateo. He studied the sky. "Right now, none," Caleb said. "In 6 weeks, maybe 4 pounds mixed. If the wind leaves it alone, 4 pounds isn't worth turning on my van. I have a truck." "Refrigerated?" "The heater doesn't work." Lena almost smiled. "Bring me 2 pounds of clean sage and 2 thyme every Tuesday for a month. Consistent weight, no wilt, no mud. If you manage that, we talk about fall herbs." Caleb tried not to answer too quickly. "What do you pay?" She named a price. It would not cover a week of Caleb's labor, but it would cover filters, fittings, and fuel. Deal? Not yet. She pointed toward the upper shelf. "Your lavender's drowning at the west end." The soil there looked dry. Caleb knelt and dug 2 fingers beneath the surface. Water sat 3 inches down where the contour dipped. He glanced at Mateo. Mateo shrugged. "She complains, then pays." Lena gave Caleb her card. "Dry roots lie, wet roots rot. Learn which one you're looking at." After she left, Caleb reshaped the west end and moved 4 lavender starts uphill. Delia arrived while he was packing the new edge. "You made a sale?" she asked. "A conditional possibility of a small sale. That's most sales." He handed her Lena's card. Delia read it and gave it back. "Good." Caleb sat back on his heels. "What? You said something was good. I say good things when they're true. I'm writing down the date. You'll lose the paper." On the next water turn, flow at Marin South Gate held within an inch of its old level. The upper contours still absorbed heavily, but the repaired leaks and schedule changes had bought them room. Caleb took his promised 4 hours and closed the turnout. As he walked back toward the trailer, he saw headlights moving slowly up Grant's driveway. A dump truck stopped near the farmhouse and raised its bed. Another load of gravel slid onto the grade above the lateral. Caleb called Grant. "You said the excavator was coming. It got delayed. You're adding more gravel." The driveway washed out at the top when the roof crew's tanker came through. "You're pitching all of it toward the channel. It's compacted. Compacted ground sheds water faster. We're in a drought." Caleb looked at the orange tape Delia had tied to the fence. It snapped in the evening wind. "Droughts end," he said. Grant's voice cooled. "I'll handle my land. You handle yours." The dump truck lowered its empty bed and backed toward the road. Below it, the old lateral ran quiet through the dark. Caleb did not call Grant again. He photographed the driveway from 3 angles, then walked the lateral with a flashlight. The new gravel had not entered the channel, but the grade above it was steeper than before. Fine gray dust already collected behind the channel bank. At sunrise, he found Delia tying a second orange strip beside the first. "You think one morning flag wasn't persuasive?" he asked. "One marks the drainage. One marks the stubbornness. Which one's Grant? The brighter one." She climbed the driveway and scraped a heel through the loose surface. Gravel skittered down to the edge of the lateral. "A diversion doesn't have to be fancy," she said. "Shallow cut across the grade. Armored outlet into the grass west of here. He says he'll handle it." "Then why are you telling me?" "I didn't tell you." She pointed to the dump truck tracks. "They're not subtle." Grant came out of the farmhouse carrying a cabinet door. He saw them on the driveway and changed direction. "You're on my parcel," he said. Caleb looked around. "It's nicer than mine." "What are the flags for?" "Delia likes color." Delia pointed west. "Turn the roadside ditch before it reaches the lateral." Grant set down the cabinet door. "My landscape contractor is doing drainage." "When?" "When we get the final grade." "You have the final grade." "No, I have the base." Delia kicked the gravel again. "That's enough to send water. There is no water." She looked toward the cloudless eastern sky. "That's a temporary condition." Grant wiped sawdust from his forearm. "I appreciate the concern." "No, you don't." Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Grant picked up the cabinet door. Stay off the driveway while the crews are working. He returned to the house. Delia watched him go. You all learned conversation from the same bad book. You keep coming back. So does water. Caleb's first delivery to Lena weighed 3 pounds and 13 ounces because 2 handfuls of thyme wilted between the hill and bellwether. He spread the herbs on the passenger seat with the air conditioning vents aimed at them, but the truck's air conditioner produced only a warm, medicinal smell. Lena met him behind a restaurant called the Copper Basin. She weighed each bag, discarded 3 damaged stems, and wrote the corrected amount on an invoice. You're short, she said. I noticed. What happened? Transport. What are you changing? Cooler, damp towels, cut before sunrise. She nodded. Tuesday, that's it. You expected a ceremony? I expected you to complain. I did. You listened. She paid only for the delivered weight. The check was small enough to fit beneath Caleb's truck registration without making a visible bump. He pinned it inside the trailer anyway. The next Tuesday, the herbs arrived cool and upright in a borrowed insulated box. Lena inspected them, found nothing to remove, and gave the box back. I thought you needed this. It smells like onions. Everything I own smells like onions. You should explore why. By the 4th delivery, she added oregano to the order. By the 5th, she asked what he could supply in fall. Caleb looked at the rows he had cut that morning. They were fuller than they had been a week earlier, but each harvest showed. Sage, some thyme, not enough lavender. Rosemary? Won't survive my winter. Good answer. She wrote quantities in the margin of his invoice. It was not a contract or a promise. It was a reason to plant another short row. Ellis Barrow visited the nursery bed on a hot afternoon and pulled 3 seedlings from the ground. Caleb nearly objected until Ellis laid them side by side and pointed to the roots. This one branched. These 2 ran straight. You need more lateral root if you're selling bare root. How? Undercut them. With what? A blade. Caleb waited. Ellis sighed. I have an old undercutter. Fits a narrow tractor. I don't have a tractor. You have a brother with one. My brother has a tractor described by a lawyer as inoperable. I saw him driving it last month. The tractor has mood swings. So does mine. Ellis replanted the seedlings and packed the soil around them. Get 50 through dormancy with decent roots. I'll buy 25 next spring. At what price? Ellis named it. Caleb did the multiplication in his head. The result would cover less than half of what he had already spent. You look disappointed, Ellis said. I'm practicing gratitude. Don't. Makes people weak in negotiations. What price do you pay Virgil? I told you not to deal with Virgil. That wasn't my question. Ellis's eyes narrowed. Then he named a higher figure. Caleb smiled. Now we're negotiating. Ellis pointed at him. Keep the roots clean and don't get clever. You're the one who taught me. I taught you roots. The warehouse supervisor was less entertained by Caleb's new schedule. Twice Caleb arrived 11 minutes late after closing the turnout. Once he fell asleep during his meal break and missed the return buzzer. The supervisor called him into the office at 3 in the morning. A plastic fern sat beneath a motivational poster that said, Reliability builds trust. Dust coated both. You need to decide what job you have, the supervisor said. I have this one. You also have something happening on that hill. Water. I don't need details. You asked. I said you need to decide. Caleb looked through the office window at pallets stacked beneath white lights. He had spent 4 years memorizing locations, fixing torn sacks, and volunteering for overtime, because overtime was the one thing he could give Amos without having to sit beside him and talk. What are my options? 4 nights instead of 5. No guarantee the 5th comes back. That's less than full time. I'm aware. Caleb calculated truck payment, fuel, and groceries. 4 nights would barely cover them. The herb sales might fill part of the gap if Lena kept ordering. Roy had pump housings that needed cleaning and more used line than cash. He thought of Grant's $5,000. I'll take 4. The supervisor leaned back. You sure? No. Good enough. With 1 extra morning, Caleb repaired the 4th contour and planted another herb row. He also began helping Roy with shop work, cleaning housings, sorting fittings, driving out to diagnose small irrigation failures. Roy paid him partly in cash and partly in materials, recording both in a ledger so neither of them could pretend the arrangement was charity. Roy let Caleb make mistakes on inexpensive equipment. The first pump Caleb reassembled leaked immediately. You forgot the seating surface, Roy said. You told me not to touch it. I told you not to damage it. That sentence has more words. So does the repair bill. They took it apart again. On the seventh water turn, Warren's right leg buckled while he crossed the bank. Caleb caught him under the arm before he hit the channel. Warren jerked away. I stepped wrong. Okay, I didn't fall. I noticed the part where I'm holding you. You were in the way. Caleb released him. Warren stood perfectly still until the pain passed, both hands gripping the pry bar. You want the chair? Caleb asked. No. The chair wants you. Warren glared at it from 20 yards away. Then he limped over and sat. Caleb brought him a bottle of water. Warren accepted without thanks. For the rest of the turn, he directed Caleb from the chair, calling out gait adjustments before Delia could. Second check, 1 inch. No, your other inch. That's 2. There are not different kinds of inch. There are when you're measuring. Later, after Mateo and Roy moved down to the return line, Warren motioned Caleb closer. Look at the hill, not the water. I've heard the opposite. Look where it's going. Leaves shine darker before the flow gets there. That means moisture's moving under the surface. Caleb followed his finger. Along the third contour, the alfalfa had deepened in color ahead of the visible water. Bank's carrying it, Warren said. If the shine rises, close the check. Means you're saturating. How do you know all this? I paid attention while Roy talked. Roy called from below. I heard that. You were supposed to. Warren's hand trembled slightly on the water bottle. He tucked it between his knees. You coming next turn? Caleb asked. If I'm invited. You've never waited for an invitation. I'm developing manners. Caleb understood what he was really asking. I need you here, he said. Warren studied the far bench so Caleb would not see the answer arrive on his face. Then straighten your checkboards. The hill produced its first harvest check, large enough to buy something that lasted. Caleb used it for a used water tank that fit in his truck bed. He wrote Sunset Table on one side with a paint marker, then crossed it out when Lena threatened to charge him for advertising. Maren began coming up on Tuesday mornings to help cut herbs before the heat. She was faster with sage and slower with thyme. Caleb accused her of choosing plants based on efficiency. I have an orchard, she said. I understand return per hour. You have no poetry. I inherited accounts payable. Sometimes they talked about Amos. More often they did not. Maren brought his pruning shears one morning. Grant had taken them from the living room, but she found them in a kitchen drawer beneath electrical receipts. Thought you could use these, she said. Caleb turned the worn handles in his palm. Did Grant say I could have them? No. So, you stole them. I redistributed an unproductive asset. He laughed. There's the poetry. The shears had been sharpened recently. Grant had done it, or paid someone to. Caleb decided not to ask. August heat pressed against the hill. Even the cheatgrass seemed tired. Maren's apples began coloring, and every water turn mattered. The upper channels had sealed enough that return flow finally reached the orchard consistently, but the margin remained narrow. Grant's driveway remained unchanged. Caleb offered twice to cut the diversion by hand. Grant said his contractor would handle it. The contractor installed stone edging near the farmhouse porch and did not touch the roadside ditch. Delia added a third orange flag. Then the Weather Service issued a dry thunderstorm advisory. Roy read it from his phone beside the turnout. Wind, lightning, maybe no rain. Maybe rain, Delia said. 20%. That's 1 storm out of 5. That's not how forecasts work. It's how hills work. The sky that evening had a yellow cast. Thunder rolled beyond the western ridge, too far away to count. Caleb checked the trailer anchors, cleared debris from the spillways, and walked the repaired banks with Warren's lesson in mind. The leaves looked dull and still. At the driveway crossing, gravel had begun sliding into the lateral without any rain at all. Caleb climbed to the farmhouse. Grant stood on the new porch frame, cutting a board. Caleb held up a handful of gray stones. The ditch is filling. Grant shut off the saw. I'll clear it tomorrow. The storm could come tonight. There's an 80% chance it doesn't. Help me cut the diversion. I have to get this covered before weather. So do I. Grant looked toward the hill. Lightning flickered inside a distant cloud, silent at first. I'll come down after I finish this section. How long? An hour. Caleb knew the answer for what it was. Not refusal, not agreement, just delay dressed as responsibility. He dropped the gravel onto the porch frame. 1 hour, he said. Then he went back to the lateral and started digging alone. The shovel Mateo had given him was excellent for shaving silt and almost useless against compacted gravel. Caleb cut an angle groove across the driveway 1 inch at a time. The blade rang against stones. Dust rose around his boots, stuck to the sweat on his arms, and found the cut on his cheek even though that injury had healed weeks ago. Lightning flickered again. The thunder arrived 6 seconds later. He checked his phone. 52 minutes. The farmhouse saw had stopped. Through an open kitchen window, Caleb could hear a radio and the clatter of tools, but Grant did not come down. At 63 minutes, Caleb threw the shovel onto the gravel and walked toward the porch. Grant met him halfway carrying a mattock and 2 work lights. "I said an hour," he called. "It's been an hour. It's been an hour and 3 minutes. 63 is more than 60. I understand clocks." Then we both learned something. Grant handed him one of the work lights. "Where do you want the cut?" Caleb pointed west, following Delia's proposed route. "Across the grade, shallow enough to drive over. It needs to empty into the grass past the lateral. You want to send runoff onto the frontage. I want to spread it before it gets speed. It'll erode the shoulder. Then we armor the outlet." "With what?" Caleb looked at the hundreds of dollars of gray gravel beneath their feet. Grant followed his gaze. "No, you have 6 truckloads. I paid for 6 truckloads. So pick your favorite 5. Grant planted the mattock in the surface. "This is why I hired someone. The someone isn't here. I'm here. Then start." Grant swung harder than necessary. The point punched through the compacted crust. He tore loose a strip of gravel, swung again, and sent a stone bouncing off Caleb's shin. "Watch it. You said start. Not a war." Grant kept digging. They worked from opposite sides of the driveway, a method that allowed progress without eye contact. Caleb shaped the downhill edge. Grant broke the hard center and complained each time the mattock struck a larger rock, as if the driveway had been installed with personal malice. The wind shifted. Hot air rolled down from the ridge, carrying the smell of dust and distant rain. "You call Maren?" Grant asked. "Not yet. She should check the orchard ditches. She knows the weather. Call her anyway. You have a phone." Grant stopped swinging. "Why does everything have to be a contest with you?" Caleb rested both hands on the shovel handle. "You just asked me to call our sister because you didn't want to. I asked because you're already coordinating water. And you're already holding a phone. It's inside. Mine's in my pocket. That doesn't make it my responsibility." Grant looked at him, as if trying to locate the reasonable brother who had lived in the laundry room and rarely argued. "There," Caleb said. "That face." "What face?" "The one where you can't believe I'm making you ask," I asked. "You instructed." Grant dragged the mattock free. "Fine. Will you please call Maren?" "Yes." Maren answered on the first ring. "I'm at the packing shed," she said. "I already pulled the west check. Grant wants you to inspect the orchard." Grant threw a piece of gravel at him. Maren heard it strike the shovel. "Are you two together?" "Emotionally, no. I'll come up when I finish here." Delia called. "She's bringing sandbags." Caleb looked toward the lateral. "Why sandbags?" "Because she's Delia." She hung up. Grant resumed digging. "You make me sound like an idiot. You threw a rock while I was on the phone. It was gravel. Strong defense." Another flash lit the western cloud. Thunder came sooner. They met in the center of the driveway. Grant levered a buried stone from the cut. It rolled to the side, revealing damp soil underneath. Caleb crouched. "That's wet." "Sprinklers from the roof crew." "You don't sprinkle a roof, they wet the dust." "When?" Grant did not answer. Caleb pushed 2 fingers into the soil. The moisture ran in a narrow line beneath the driveway toward the lateral. "Your base is trapping seepage." "It's a driveway, Caleb, not a dam. It's both if water gets under it. Delia teach you that?" The hill did. Grant gave him a long look, then attacked the cut again. Maren arrived with a row tractor, its old engine coughing blue smoke. A stack of empty feed sacks and 6 sandbags rode in the rear scoop. Caleb stared. The attorney said that didn't operate. The attorney doesn't know the choke sticks. Grant took it. Grant left the key in the barn. Grant pointed the mattock at her. "That's not permission. You asked me to inspect the orchard. I inspected it faster." She parked beside them and looked at the groove. "That's your diversion?" "We just started. You've been here an hour." Grant and Caleb spoke at the same time. He was late. "He's using a garden shovel." Maren turned off the tractor. "I regret coming." Delia's flatbed appeared behind her with Mateo, Roy, and Warren. Warren rode in the passenger seat with Caleb's folding chair held upright between his knees. "You brought it from my hill?" Caleb asked when he climbed out. "I've invested in comfort. You stole it. I'm redistributing an unproductive asset." Marin looked pleased. "See? Useful phrase." Delia walked the new cut. She looked at the damp seam, then at the sky. "Too shallow," she said. Grant dropped the mattock. "Of course it is. The center's fine. The west end needs another 4 inches and a wider fan. You can drive over that when it's packed. I need access for contractors." Delia pointed at the cloud. "Your contractor's coming tonight." A low growl rolled across the valley. Mateo and Caleb deepened the outlet. Grant loaded loose gravel into the tractor scoop, while Marin spread it over the grass in a wide apron. Roy inspected the lateral crossing and found the culvert beneath the driveway half full of stones. "Was this cleaned before the gravel went down?" he asked. Grant knelt beside him. It was open. That wasn't the question. Grant looked into the pipe. The trucks must have pushed some in. Roy lay on one shoulder and reached inside with a rake. The trucks are becoming important characters. They pulled out rocks, a piece of roofing felt, 2 crushed water bottles, and an old work glove that did not belong to anyone present. Beneath the debris, the pipe was rusted but intact. Delia opened the nearest spillway on the lateral. Grant saw her lift the checkboard. "Why are you sending it toward Caleb's hill? There's no flow right now." "Then why open it? If runoff gets into the lateral, it needs somewhere to go. It goes south, to the orchard in your barn. So, we let it onto his plantings?" Caleb looked at Delia. "The contours spread it," she said. "If they're open, what happens to the nursery bed? Depends how much rain." Grant wiped his hands on his jeans. "Close the main crossing instead. And send the driveway runoff over the bank, away from the orchard." "Toward whose parcel?" Caleb asked. Grant looked up the hill. There it was, the shape of the decision before any water arrived. Protect one piece by sending the force toward another. Amos had done it slowly, over seasons, and called it necessity. Myron heard it too. "We keep the return open," she said. "And the spillways." Grant looked at her. "That puts the upper rows in the path. It gives the water 6 benches before it reaches us." "And his nursery?" Caleb imagined the 50 seedlings, 47 now, standing in their narrow rows beside the trailer. The service berries had just begun adding new leaves. The thyme he was supposed to cut for Lena on Tuesday would not survive being buried in silt. "Leave the first check half open," he said. "The overflow can move around the nursery into the second contour." Delia shook her head. "At high flow, half open catches debris. Then I stay there and clear it. You can't manage 6 checks alone in a storm." "I won't be alone." No one answered immediately. Roy crawled out from beneath the crossing. "Culvert's clear." Warren had unfolded the chair beside the lateral. He sat with both palms on the head of his pry bar, watching the western sky. "This one's moving north," he said. The dark cloud had spread along the ridge, but the lower edge drifted away from them. Thunder rolled, then faded. A few drops struck the driveway, each leaving a dark circle the size of a coin. Everyone stopped to watch. The drops came faster for half a minute. Dust released a warm, earthy smell. Water dotted the tractor hood. Then it stopped. Sunlight broke through below the cloud and lit the orchard in a strange orange wash. Grant looked at the diversion they had cut, at the sandbags and open spillway. 20%, he said. Delia did not move. "We should finish the outlet," Caleb said. "It's finished enough." You heard her? Another 4 inches. The surface is already soft. We keep cutting. We make it impassable. Marin looked west. There are more clouds. There are always more clouds somewhere. Grant picked up the mattock and carried it toward the farmhouse. Caleb followed him to the edge of the driveway. "You said you'd help." "I did help, until it became inconvenient." Grant turned. "I have a roof covered in tarps and $20,000 of interior work exposed. I'm going to secure it, so say that. Don't pretend the weather's over because your part is." Grant's face tightened. "You think because you sleep less and carry a shovel, everything you do is noble. I never said that. You don't have to. You've been saying it with your face since the funeral." Caleb remembered Mateo accusing him of the same thing beside the flooded trailer. Grant continued before he could answer. "You took care of Grandpa. I know. You want the rest of us to say we failed some test. You left. Yes. The word came hard and immediate. Grant looked toward the farmhouse. Every time I came, he told me what was wrong with my work, my truck, my marriage, my plans. When I stayed away, he asked you why I didn't care. There was no correct distance from that man. There wasn't for me either, no. But you stayed, so now you get to be the one who suffered correctly. Caleb stared at him. Wind rattled the cottonwoods below. The orange flag snapped against the wire. I wanted you to feel bad, Caleb said. Grant's expression shifted. After the will, Caleb continued. After you changed the locks, I wanted you to feel as bad as I did. You succeeded. That doesn't mean I was wrong. I know. The admission did not repair anything. It only made the space between them more honest. Grant nodded toward the farmhouse. I have to cover the kitchen. Go. He went. Caleb, Marin, and Mateo deepened the diversion outlet. Roy placed 3 sandbags along the lateral bank beneath the driveway. Delia walked every open spillway up the hill. Warren remained in his chair, tracking the clouds. By 10, the sky was clear enough to show stars. Go home, Delia told Caleb. My home's up there. Then go uphill. He checked the nursery, moved Lena's insulated box inside the trailer, and laid Amos's pruning shears on the counter. The air remained warm. Distant lightning flickered without sound. Caleb slept in his clothes. His phone rang at 12:46. He woke to Marin shouting his name. Rain hammered the trailer roof so hard that he could barely hear her. The driveway diversion failed, she said. Water's crossing into the lateral. Caleb opened the door. The hill had vanished behind a gray wall. Water already ran beneath the trailer in bright, twisting streams. Below him, where the upper turnout entered the first contour, a dark surge climbed over the bank. Caleb stepped into water over his ankles. It rushed from beneath the trailer, carrying mulch, sage leaves, and one of Warren's orange flags. Rain struck his face sideways. He reached back inside for his coat, then abandoned it and grabbed the ditch shovel instead. Marin, where are you? South Gate. Is the return open? Half. The lower check is jammed. Get it all the way open. I'm trying. A sheet of water crossed the first contour and spread toward the nursery bed. Caleb ran to the turnout. The gate stood higher than he had left it. Pressure from the overfilled lateral forced water beneath and around the frame. He put both hands on the wheel. Caleb! Marin shouted through the phone. What are you doing? Closing the upper. If you close it, all of this comes down here. He knew. He turned the wheel anyway. It moved a quarter turn, then stopped. Water piled against the gate and sprayed through the stem packing. The first contour began dropping, sparing the nursery, but the main lateral rose another inch. Below the hill, Marin's truck lights cut across the orchard. Water shone between the rows where no water should have been. I can save the bed, Caleb said, though he was not sure whether he was speaking to her. What? Nothing. A truck horn sounded behind him. Delia's flatbed climbed the west track, with Roy driving and Mateo standing in the back beneath a yellow rain slicker. The truck slid sideways once, caught, and continued. Warren rode in the cab, holding the orange tape roll against his chest. Roy stopped beside the trailer. Delia jumped down before the wheels quit moving. Why are you closing the turnout? The nursery's flooding. The lateral's overtopping below the driveway. I can see that. Then open it. Caleb kept both hands on the wheel. Water curled around the first sandbag Roy had placed at the crossing and carried it toward the orchard. The bag struck the culvert mouth, lodging sideways. Gravel and roofing debris gathered against it. Roy saw it. Culverts plugging. Mateo jumped from the flatbed with a rake. Delia stepped close enough that Caleb could see rain running from her eyebrows. Open every contour, she said. What happens to the seedlings? They take water. They get washed out. Some will. I've got orders. You've got a hill with 6 places to spread this and people below, with 1 place to receive it. The gate wheel trembled beneath Caleb's hands. If he opened it, water would cross the nursery, the herbs, the service berries, every piece of the future he had planted. If he held it closed, the surge would remain in the lateral, gather behind the crossing, and travel toward Marin's orchard and Grant's barn. For a moment, Amos's choice seemed less monstrous than it had on a dry afternoon. 1 working crop, 1 unproven hill. Money already growing on one side, promises on the other. Necessity could wear any face a person needed. Caleb spun the wheel open. Water punched beneath the gate with enough force to knock him backward. Delia caught his arm. "First check," she said. "Go." He ran along the contour. Water raced beside him, no longer the patient, creeping line he had followed on the first turn. It carried sticks, gravel, and clumps of grass. At the nursery, the half-open check caught a branch exactly as Delia had warned. Debris piled behind it. Caleb waded in and pulled. The branch would not move. Water climbed to his shins, pressing cold and heavy against his legs. "Leave it!" Delia shouted. "If it holds, the bank goes." He jammed the shovel beneath the branch and levered upward. The wood snapped. The broken half spun past his knee, and water struck the checkboard broadside. The board shuddered. Caleb seized the handle and pulled it free. The first surge crossed the nursery bed. Seedlings bent flat. Mulch lifted in a brown mat. One irrigation line tore loose and whipped across the surface. Caleb watched the water take the north row he had planted with Mateo and carry 3 seedlings toward the second contour. He had 1 second to mourn them. Then, the bank below the trailer began to shine. Warren's voice came from the flatbed. "Close the west spill. Ground saturated underneath." Caleb looked through the rain. Warren pointed with the pry bar. The leaves along the western edge reflected a dark, oily green. Moisture climbed above the contour, exactly as Warren had taught him. Caleb ran back, fitted the checkboard into the west slot, and forced the flow east toward the stone spillway. The old stones disappeared beneath water, but held. A headlight beam swung wildly across the slope. Grant's pickup stopped at the base of the track. He climbed out carrying sandbags over both shoulders. "Road's gone above the house," he shouted. "What do you mean gone?" Water cut across it. The diversion outlet collapsed. Delia pointed downhill. "Help Roy at the culvert." Grant looked toward Caleb's flooded nursery. "What happened?" Caleb lifted another check. "Your contractor arrived." Grant stood there long enough for the words to reach him, then turned and ran toward the crossing. Marin called again. "The lower gate won't move. Roy's clearing the culvert. That doesn't help the gate. I'm opening the benches. I can see the water." Her voice broke beneath static and rain. "Is the barn flooding?" Caleb asked. "Not yet. The north orchard row is under. Open every tree check. Spread it. That'll saturate the roots. It'll wash the packing shed if you don't." "I know." He heard Grant in the background, closer to her now. "Marin, get the tractor." The call ended. Caleb followed water into the second contour. Mateo worked ahead of him, lifting debris with the rake. The flow reached the surviving pear stubs. It divided around them, filled the basins, and continued. The old alfalfa flattened beneath the current, its flowers disappearing into brown water. At the third check, Delia tested the bank with her steel rod. "Soft," she said. "Everything's soft. This section's moving." The bank bulged on the downhill side. A narrow stream threaded through it. Caleb grabbed a sandbag. "We pack it. No time. Relieve pressure. If we open the third, it goes through the herbs. It goes there or through the bank." His Tuesday order stood below them in neat rows: sage, thyme, oregano. 5 mornings of cutting and delivering had bought the emitters beneath the mud. Lena had asked for more in fall. The stream through the bank widened. Caleb pulled the third board. Water crossed the herbs in one broad sheet. Sage plants bowed and vanished. Thyme tore out in clumps, pale roots flashing before the current covered them. The pressure dropped. The leaking bank stopped widening. Delia slapped Caleb's shoulder once. There was no time to decide whether it was comfort. At the driveway crossing, Roy and Grant stood waist-deep in the lateral. The jammed sandbag had disappeared beneath a wedge of gravel and branches. Mateo joined them with the rake. "Get out of the pipe mouth!" Delia shouted. Roy ignored her. The culvert backed up until water crossed the new gravel surface, running toward the farmhouse. Grant drove the mattock into the debris and pulled loose a section of roofing felt. A burst of water dragged him off balance. Caleb reached him first. He caught Grant's tool belt and hauled backward. Grant's knee struck the bank, but he stayed upright. "I had it," Grant said. "You were swimming. I know how to swim." With a mattock? Roy jabbed the rake into the jam. Save the family conversation. All 3 pulled. The sandbag tore. Wet fill spilled into the culvert and vanished. Gravel collapsed behind it, then shifted. The obstruction released in a single violent motion. Water shot through the pipe. Roy fell backward onto the bank. Mateo sat down hard in the channel. Grant dropped the mattock and stared as the lateral level fell 6 inches. "Everybody attached?" Warren called from the truck. Roy raised one arm, mostly. Caleb helped Mateo stand. Delia checked Roy, pressing both hands along his shoulder and ribs while he complained that she was making it worse. "You landed in mud," she said. "I landed strategically. You land like furniture." Grant bent over, hands on his knees. Blood ran from a scrape along his forearm and disappeared in the rain. Caleb pointed uphill. "The diversion. What about it? We need to reopen the west outlet or this keeps feeding the lateral." Grant looked toward the farmhouse. Water crossed the driveway in a silver sheet, carrying gravel into the roadside ditch. The porch work lights illuminated rain pouring from the tarps above the kitchen. "My roof covering's loose." "The driveway first," Caleb said. Grant's eyes went to the house. Caleb understood that choice too. Grant had put months of work and money into those walls. Amos had given him the farmhouse, but gifts had their own appetites. The house could consume whatever Grant had and still leak. "Go cover it," Caleb said. "I'll take the outlet." Grant looked at him. "You need people up here. So does the house." For 1 second, relief crossed Grant's face. Then he shook his head. "The tarps can leak." He picked up the mattock. They climbed together. The diversion had not merely failed. Water had cut beneath its downstream lip and peeled away a section of gravel, creating a steep chute into the lateral. The loose apron they had spread over the grass had washed into a pile against the fence. Caleb and Grant dug a second outlet farther west. Each shovelful filled with rain as soon as they removed it. Myron arrived on the tractor carrying orchard stones in the scoop. "The lower gate's open," she shouted. "Packing shed's clear." She lowered the scoop beside the outlet. Grant and Caleb rolled the stones into the cut, armoring the base while Mateo shaped the fan below. Lightning struck somewhere close enough to turn the whole hill white. The thunder hit immediately. Warren shouted from the truck, "Down!" Everyone crouched by instinct. Caleb felt the sound in his teeth. The flatbed's headlights went dark. "Electrical?" Roy called. "Engine stalled," Warren answered. "Stay in the cab." "I'm not in the cab." Through the rain, Caleb saw Warren standing beside the folding chair with the pry bar in his hand. Delia moved toward him. "Get inside." Fourth contours overtopping. Caleb turned. A bright ribbon of water poured over the far end of the fourth bench. If it cut downward, it would bypass the fifth and sixth contours and strike the lower orchard as a concentrated stream. "I'll go," Caleb said. Warren pointed. "Not straight down. East side's firmer." Caleb climbed, slipping twice on mud. Grant followed. "You don't have to," Caleb shouted. "Neither do you." They reached the fourth contour where water cut a notch through the bank. Caleb drove the shovel into the breach, but the soil slid away. "Needs a board," he said. Grant looked around. The nearest loose checkboard lay 50 yards back. He pulled a length of decking from beneath the trailer awning. Caleb recognized it as one of the boards Grant had offered for the steps. "You brought that up?" "I left some here last week." "When?" "When you were at work." "Why?" "Your steps were splitting. The board was too long." Grant laid it across 2 rocks and raised the mattock. Caleb almost laughed. "Wrong tool. Do you want carpentry or water control?" Grant struck the board. It cracked but did not split. They broke it on the second blow, drove both pieces into the notch, and packed mud behind them. Water changed direction, returning to the contour. Below them, the fifth bench filled from end to end. The hill darkened in wide horizontal bands. Each restored contour caught part of the storm, slowed it, and passed the excess onward. The system Amos had abandoned was not stopping the water. It was teaching the water how to descend. For another hour they moved from check to check. The nursery lost most of its north row. The service berry at the low end tore free, its roots exposed in the current. Half the herbs lay buried under gravel and silt. Caleb stopped counting. At 3:30, the rain weakened. Nobody trusted it. They stood across the hill in soaked clothes, watching the banks. Water continued moving through the contours and into the return, but the levels began to fall. Marin came up from the orchard on foot. Mud covered her to the waist. "The barn's dry," she said. "South row's flooded, but the trunks are standing." Packing shed took water under one door. Grant looked downhill toward the farmhouse. The house, porch tarp tore. Kitchen got wet. How wet? Wet. He closed his eyes. Caleb looked at his nursery. Several seedlings lay sideways, roots exposed. The insulated delivery box floated against the trailer step. Grant followed his gaze. "I'm sorry," he said. Caleb could not answer yet. Delia walked the repaired bank with her steel rod. At the place that had failed during the first water turn, she drove the rod into the clay, pulled it free, and moved 2 feet farther. "Holding," she called. The single word traveled across the slope. Caleb sat down in the mud. Dawn had not arrived, but the eastern clouds had begun losing their blackness. Around him, water moved in 6 long curves through the hill. Grant lowered himself beside him, close but not touching. Neither spoke. Below them, the orchard lights remained on. The barn stood. The farmhouse stood. The battered trailer leaned exactly as it had before the storm. In the nearest contour, the old alfalfa began lifting its flattened leaves through the water. Grant spoke when the sky had lightened enough to show the damage clearly. "I should have cut the diversion when Delia told me." "Yes." He turned his head, perhaps expecting Caleb to soften the answer. Caleb watched a pear seedling rotate slowly in the last current along the second contour. "You should have stopped the trucks from crushing the lateral. You should have moved the gravel when I asked. You should have given me more than 4 days to leave the house." "I know." "No, you know now. It's different." Grant wiped rain from his face with both hands. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." That was the problem with apologies Caleb had waited too long to receive. He had imagined them so many times that the real words arrived smaller than the space prepared for them. Delia approached carrying the steel rod. "Bank's stable," she said. For the moment, Grant stood. "What do we do?" "Watch the 4th contour. Clear the 2nd spillway when the level drops. Nobody drives the west track until it dries. I mean, about his planting." Delia looked over the flattened nursery and buried herbs. "Same thing you do with anything after water. Count what's still there." Caleb began at the north row. 16 pear seedlings were gone or broken. 7 more had exposed roots but living stems. 1 service berry had washed against the fence. The thyme was almost entirely buried. Sage looked battered but rooted. The old pear stubs remained in place, and the alfalfa, insolent as ever, continued lifting through the mud. Ellis arrived before noon carrying a square-bladed spade. "Roy called," he said. Caleb looked at Roy, who became interested in the trailer supports. Ellis dug the surviving seedlings gently, trimmed torn roots, and reset them. He discarded 2 that Caleb would have tried to save. "These might make it," he said. "Might?" "You want certainty, raise rocks. I have those. No market." Lena's Tuesday order sat beneath 6 inches of silt. Caleb called her from the hill. "I can't deliver this week." "Storm?" "Yes." "Your cooler survive?" It floated. "Good cooler. I lost most of the time." "What about sage? Some standing. Wash it, don't drown it. Bring what's usable Thursday. We adjust." "You don't have to." "I know. That's why it's business." She paid for 9 ounces of sage that Thursday. It was Caleb's smallest check from her. He pinned it beside the first. Grant returned to the hill every morning after the storm. He did not arrive with another offer or a speech. He brought the tractor, a shovel, and the leftover decking. Before touching the farmhouse kitchen, he cut the driveway diversion to Delia's depth, widened the outlet, and lined it with stone. Caleb watched him work for 2 days before helping. They spoke mostly about grade and drainage. When Grant used the tractor to shape a level pad beneath the trailer, Caleb objected that he had not asked. Grant stopped the engine. "Do you want it level?" "Yes." "Then can we skip the part where you refuse first? I might be busy. Schedule it for lunch." Caleb picked up a rake. Together they reset the trailer on compacted gravel above the first contour. Grant used the decking to build 3 permanent steps and a small landing. He made the frame square, checked it twice, then checked again, after Caleb accused him of inheriting Amos's distrust of levels. "You're welcome to build it yourself," Grant said. "I am building it. You're holding one end. It's an important end." Grant tightened the last bolt. "All ends think that." The porch was not an apology. Caleb was glad of that. He could stand on it without falling through. Marin's lower orchard lost fruit from 3 rows, but the trunks remained upright, and the packing shed dried after 2 days of fans. She replaced the warped door herself. Then she brought her yellow legal pad to Caleb's trailer and sat at the new landing with a calculator. "I want a schedule that isn't based on whoever complains loudest," she said. "Grant's going to struggle. This is between the parcels, not Grant." They wrote down actual flow, turn length, expected return, and the adjustments each would make during drought. Caleb's upper ground received its full turn, while the channels continued sealing. Maren shifted the south orchard rows to cooler hours. If either side needed a temporary change, they would ask before touching a gate. Maren drew a line beneath the agreement. "We should both sign." Caleb looked at the page. "Delia's going to laugh at your boxes. My boxes are excellent." They signed anyway and pinned a copy inside the packing shed beside the irrigation chart. It was not a hidden right or a victory over anyone. It was two people promising clearly where Amos had preferred assumptions. Grant saw the copy and said nothing. On the first cold morning, he left a weatherproof cover over Caleb's filter. Maren redistributed another unproductive asset, Amos's old grafting knife, found in a barn drawer. Caleb cleaned it beside the brass bell in the trailer. Winter reduced the hill to its bones. Snow gathered in the repaired contours, melted slowly, and soaked in rather than rushing downhill. The service berries lost their leaves, the herbs turned gray. Caleb spent 4 nights a week at the warehouse and 2 mornings in Roy's shop, where he learned that a seeding surface could be cleaned without being damaged, and that Roy would mention the first pump leak until one of them died. Delia visited after every hard freeze. She checked gates, not Caleb. On the anniversary of Amos's death, Caleb walked the hill with the old pruning shears in his pocket. Grant came up carrying coffee. Maren followed with 3 breakfast sandwiches. No one had arranged it. They stood beside the pear rootstock Delia had uncovered. The year's growth had gone dormant, a thin branch rising from the old crown. "Grandpa would cut that off," Grant said. "It's above the graft now," Caleb replied. Still crooked. He was crooked. Maren handed Caleb a sandwich. He'd say it needed another season before judging. Grant looked at her. He judged cabinets before they were installed. He judged restaurants from the parking lot. Remember when he refused to eat at that diner because the flag was twisted? Caleb did. Amos had sat in the truck for 40 minutes, and then eaten half of Caleb's sandwich on the drive home. They laughed. Not because Amos had become kinder in memory, but because he no longer had to be only cruel or only loved. Caleb rang the brass bell once before returning it to the trailer. The sound was thin and clear in the cold air. Spring water moved through all 6 contours. Ellis taught Caleb to graft the strongest rootstock. His hands were impatient, but his cuts were exact. Caleb ruined the first 4. "Too deep," Ellis said. "You said expose the cambium. I didn't say perform surgery." The 5th graft fit cleanly. Ellis wrapped it and made Caleb do the next one without instruction. 27 seedlings survived the storm and winter with saleable roots. Ellis bought 25 at the price they had negotiated and complained that Caleb's bundles were tied too neatly. "You want them messier? I want you to know neatness doesn't add $1, it added 50 cents. You're learning bad habits." The sale did not change Caleb's life. It paid for new nursery stock, compost, and enough proper line to replace Roy's most sun-damaged sections. Lena increased her weekly herb order when the sage returned. Mateo introduced 2 growers looking for service berry starts, though Caleb had nothing large enough to sell them yet. The work remained small, uncertain, and his. Grant finished the farmhouse kitchen, but left the old clock above the refrigerator. He repaired the west track and added a water bar above Caleb's trailer. When Caleb thanked him, Grant said, "Don't make it strange." Maren accused him of stealing her line. The old crew gathered for ditch clearing in April. Warren arrived early with the folding chair tied to Roy's truck and insisted that his leg was excellent, despite using the pry bar as a cane. Mateo brought ham sandwiches. Roy brought smoked oysters, which Delia threatened to classify as ditch contamination. They cleared the main lateral, reset checks, and opened the upper turnout. Near sunset, Delia washed her tools at the first contour. Then she took a ring of scarred keys from her belt and held it out to Caleb. "What are those?" "You've used them. Not without you. Time you did." Caleb did not take them immediately. "You're quitting?" "No," Roy answered from the flatbed. "She's been quitting for 20 years. Delia ignored him. "This is our last official clearing." "What does official mean?" "It means Warren sits before work starts. Mateo needs 2 days to recover. Roy can't lift the main gate without complaining, and I'm tired of organizing people who think 7 means 7:30. "I arrived at 6:58, Roy said. "You arrived without the packing wrench. It was in Mateo's truck." "Because I put it there," Mateo said. Caleb looked from one to another. Who's going to clear it? You, Delia said. Alone? She took a folded notebook from her back pocket. Its cover was soft from years of handling. Inside were gate measurements, trouble spots, dates of repairs, and observations written in 4 different hands. Not ownership papers, not instructions left by Amos. Habits accumulated by people who had returned often enough to know what failed. Call the parcel owners, Delia said. Make them show up. They won't. They didn't for me either. Call again. Caleb took the notebook and keys. Warren lifted himself from the chair. He'll put the second check in backward, then Water will explain, Mateo said. They were not retiring gracefully. They came to every water turn that spring. By autumn, green contours crossed the brown hill clearly enough to see from Tilson Road. Grafted pears stood shoulder-high along the lower bench. Service berries held the upper edge. Sage and thyme dried in bunches beneath the trailer awning, and Caleb's porch extended far enough to hold 2 chairs, one of which Warren claimed without legal basis. On the first ditch day, Caleb organized himself. Grant arrived with lumber for a railing. Marin brought food from the packing shed refrigerator. Ellis came to inspect grafts and stayed for supper, after declaring the potatoes undercooked. Lena brought bread and complained that Caleb's fall sage order was light. Delia's old crew arrived first. Caleb set a long table beside the upper channel. Near dusk, he opened the check and watched water travel past the place where his folding chair had once hidden the ditch. It moved beneath the pear leaves, through the hill, and down toward the orchard. People who had once come looking for the owner sat arguing over Roy's oysters, waiting for Caleb to join them. He hung the gate keys on his belt and did.